Moved by Councillor Nielsen. We have one added agenda item, the Remembrance Week proclamation. So that'll be item 8E. With that amendment, anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Item 4A, approval of the minutes.
I move that Wetaskiwin City Council approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting October 13th, 2020.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried.
I move that City Council approve the meetings of the regular council meeting of October 13th, 2020.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Any errors or omissions? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Item 5A, the AUMA Above and Beyond Award. Not here.
Sorry, the mic is hardwired in here. So administration had proposed earlier this year to recommend that John Maud and Susan Quinn Charitable Foundation be recognized for their charitable givings within the city of Wetaskiwin. And that AUMA decided that based on the merits of the application that they would be a good candidate to recognize for the Above and Beyond Award. We have the award here from AUMA and would like the opportunity for council to present that.
I'm not seeing John or... Oh, sorry. Masks don't help. So the John Maud and Susan Quinn Charitable Foundation was nominated for the 2020 AUMA Above and Beyond Award by City Administration for their outstanding contributions to the city's social sustainability. Some examples include supporting our plastic checkout bag ban bylaw by sponsoring the purchase of reusable bags to be given out to community members, providing funding to purchase solar panels to be installed on city-owned facility, and sponsoring tree plantings along the walking path on Highway 13. They've been an incredible part of our community, and I think this is just a small token of how grateful we are to have you folks in our community. So thank you very much. I'm going to meet you folks just on in the foyer side here, and I'll present you with your award. Are we supposed to go? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew, do you mind just making sure that mic is on, or when somebody comes up to speak, and maybe just bring it up a little bit too. I don't know if it'll be high enough.
Now it's on.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 6A, public hearings. So I declare the public hearing regarding proposed bylaw 1974-20 be opened at 4:06 p.m. I will ask the municipal clerk to explain the purpose of the hearing. Okay.
So the purpose of bylaw 1974-20 is to amend the city of Saskatchewan land use bylaw by redistricting lot 2C, lot 56, plan 872-1263, is 417 36th Avenue, from C3 highway commercial districts to DC direct control.
Thank you. Has notice of this hearing been provided in accordance with the applicable legislation and bylaws of the city of Wetaskiwin?
Notice is provided directly to property owners within 76 meters of
Turn your mic on.
There we go. How's that? Great. Notice was provided directly to property owners within 76 meters of the subject property as per the land use bylaw. Notice was placed in the October 21st edition of the Wetaskiwin Times and the Pipestone Flyer. A notice of the public hearing was posted to the City of Wetaskiwin website and Facebook pages.
I will now request that Development Services provide their report regarding this matter.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on September 14th, 2020, Council approved funding for the Open Door to mobilize, operate, and manage a 24/7 support site at a mutually agreed upon location to commence operation November 1st, 2020. The proposed location is legally described as Lot 2C, Blocks 56, Plan 872-1263 at 5417 36th Avenue. It is currently Zone C3, Highway Commercial. The proposed use would be defined in the city's land use bylaw as a temporary shelter service, which is not currently allowable in that district. Therefore, redistricting is required before a development permit can be issued for a change in use for the property. Direct control zoning will allow council to control development to ensure that the use of the land is compatible with the surrounding uses. The agency who will be operating the shelter has worked with administration to identify a location that would best serve the needs of the users while considering potential impacts on the community. The direct control zoning would leave council with the ability to approve development permits as they come up as the use continues on.
Good. Have we received any written submissions? And if so, are you distributed them to council?
I have distributed them to you. Yes, there are several. And so they're there for your information. And I will read a summary of the statements that we did collect throughout. There were many statements that were found in several of the letters that were repeated. So I'll summarize them here. So some of the concerns that were presented in the written submissions included concerns about this potentially increasing loitering, public intoxication in the area, concerns for safety of kids in the area. A lot of these statements, several of them indicated that there's been a history of property damage and violence in the area. Several instances were noted of negative experiences with people who are intoxicated in public. There were concerns about fears of vandalism at adjacent properties, impact on the property values in the area. Many of these letters indicated support for the idea of a shelter in the city here, but that this is not the location for it. There were concerns about the lack of consultation regarding the specific location of this, of the support hub. There were requests for more information regarding how the hub will be secured, security, and also how it will be operated going forward. Also, a few questions about whether the 4 bands have been consulted as an interested stakeholder. And yes, more questions about how the facility will be operated. There were also letters of support that were provided, indicating that this location is good because it's not near a school. Also that generalizations about people who are homeless does not necessarily mean that they're dangerous. That it would be better to have a place for these people to go than to be sleeping outside. One letter indicated that people will often sleep on properties surrounding, and that it would be better for them to have a building and a place to go. One comment said, as long as the operation has appropriate staffing levels, training, and communication, indicating specifically that more communication between the Open Door and community surrounding would be good. So that's a summary of the written submissions.
Good. Thank you. Is there anyone present that's wishing to be heard? Do we have is this the order of presenters then? Okay. So I've got Jody Napier, sorry.
Well, if I wasn't nervous enough, put me first. Yay. Thanks for that, guys. So, council, my name is Jody Napier, and I live on 53rd Street. I'm the very last house on 53rd Street going south. The runoff ditch, you go any further, you're in it beside my house. So I've been here for 19 years, and I would just like to give you a little summary of the crime that at one point I said to the RCMP I should be getting air miles for how many times I was calling in, because it's quite because it's the south end of town. It is, and it's by the mall. We get some traffic. We'll just put it that way. So in 19 years, we've had 3 dead bodies, 2 one behind my house, 1 just into the field, and 1 in the runoff ditch. So yay. That's how we, so when you're proposing something that has been proven that homeless shelters do increase crime, it's a bit of it's a tricky situation. So I don't oppose it. I oppose where you want to put it. So just like one of the other people who he had read off about being, they don't want it around children. I'm totally opposed to it being around anybody that's vulnerable. Horizons is right there. Those are vulnerable people, and I don't agree with that. So myself and Brenda Craven, we decided to take it upon ourselves to go out and do a canvass of the neighborhood and do a petition. In doing that, one side of 36th Avenue, which is not a long avenue at all, there's not a lot of homes there, just in that one side, 5 vehicle thefts, 3 home invasions, 1 break-in and entry, 1 person woke up to a person's asleep on their couch. Another lady was charged in her front yard with a man with a machete or a hatchet in his hand in the middle of the afternoon. My own experience recently in August, I had my neighbor, I just got home, my neighbor texted me, there was somebody in my car. I came out, I banged on my car to get this dude out of my car, and he came at me with a vodka bottle. He did not assault me because I'm not anybody's hero, obviously, I'm little. And so I ran around my car to avoid him. He then assaulted my neighbor, and my husband came home from work. He was working, and he works quite close, so he was able to get home in record time, and he detained him until police got there. So that's just an example of all the crime in our area already. So when I bought my home, my husband is ex-military. When I bought my home, I canvassed. I went door to door. I wanted to know if that runoff ditch flooded. I wanted to know what the crime situation was in that area, that kind of stuff. And at that time, it was pretty quiet in our area. It wasn't too bad. Well, 5 years ago, kind of crap hit the fan and it started to increase. So my concern is, and it is a proven fact, that homeless shelters do increase the crime in an area. And I would be here speaking for anybody else if it was introduced into their neighborhood as well. This is a residential area and it should be respected. We should have the first say on this as people living in that area paying our taxes, which I've never once ever defaulted on people. So out of respect, that should have been done. We should have gotten notice. Probably 98% of everybody that I talked to, none of them knew that this was happening. It was, as far as I'm concerned, I did lose a little respect for you guys because you kind of snuck it under the wire for us. We don't all babysit your website, and we don't all read the 3 pieces of newspaper. And there's a lot of people that I talked to that just are older people who don't do the social media thing, don't do the computer thing. So they didn't have access to even knowing to check your website. So it's a tricky situation, definitely, but I 100% think it needs to go in an area where there's no foot traffic to businesses, where there's no vulnerable people of any sort, and no residential. And that's my spiel.
Thank you.
So.
And I should have mentioned, sorry, when we started, not that you had gone over, Jody, but just we have a 5-minute limit for speaking, just for anybody else that'll be coming up and speaking next. No, you didn't. No, you were good. You timed it perfectly. You had like 35 more seconds. Next, we have Brenda Craven. They're non-transferable.
Alrighty, I decided to write mine down so that I can just read it because I am nervous. I felt like I was in high school having to do this. Anyways, good afternoon, Mayor Gandam and City Council members. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Brenda Craven and I reside with my spouse, Donald, at 5307 36th Avenue in Wetaskiwin, Alberta. When Don retired from the Canadian Armed Forces, we knew we wanted to make Alberta our home province. On July 1st, 1996, we officially became residents in our neighborhood of Linalta. We raised our family here while watching our neighborhood evolve and grow. We have bore witness to ever-expanding social issues that are causing concern and worry for so many in our community. We have aged and our neighborhood has changed. On Monday, October 19th, 2020, while scrolling Facebook, I noticed a post on a local Wetaskiwin rant rave group by Scott Kaiba. It read, is this location for the 24/7 integrated support hub, shelter, a rant, or a rave? Immediately, my interest was piqued as I realized this was our street. We knew about the city's approval and were aware that we were working on a location, but nothing had been announced. I read the post and learned that it was a notice of public hearing for redistricting. I started reading comments to get a sense of how others felt about this happening in our neighborhood. Comments ranged from saying it was a rant, others applauding the location, while others voiced concern due to the problems already in our area and how crime will continue to increase. I spoke up and gave my opinion on how we already have enough problems on this end of town and that it's not fair to the surrounding businesses or residents. I was quickly criticized and it was pointed out that I did not want it in my neighborhood, but it was okay to be in theirs. I feel that it's inappropriate to put it in any location where it can affect residents, business owners, their customers, or clients. I have a very good reason to be concerned after having been assaulted in my own front yard on August the 12th. I am Jody's neighbor. Realizing the proposal would mean the shelter would be close to our home created a sense of apprehension and triggered a negative reaction causing anxiety. I began to wonder how our neighbors felt and if they were aware or concerned. In the morning, I discussed the proposal with Don and asked how he felt. He was just as concerned and wondered how this would impact our ability to sell as we considered downsizing in the future. I decided to call our neighbor Jody Napier, who has lived across the street since 2001. Jody was aware of the shelter, but not the public notice. We talked about how in the past, as residents, we have received public notices regarding zoning bylaw changes that affect our neighborhood delivered by mail, but not this time. We decided to canvass our neighbors in the form of a petition to find out how they felt and bring awareness. Tuesday, October 20th, we began our campaign and started knocking on doors. As we worked our way west, it became apparent that the majority of our neighbors knew about the shelter, but none were aware of the public hearing or proposed location. We collected signatures from residents who opposed the zoning change. Only one resident refused to open the door or sign. It was definitely a learning experience to discover how truly horrendous the crime has become and how much goes unreported in our area. The dynamics inside each home changes. Some are young families, some are single adults, others are single parent homes or blended families. Many are seniors with vulnerable health concerns and mobility issues. Due to overwhelming success of canvassing neighbors, we decided to expand the geographical area and take our petition to the farmers market at the mall on Wednesday. We have collected well over 100 signatures indicating overwhelmingly that other residents are just as opposed to the bylaw rezoning change as much as we are. I faced an awful lot of criticism on social media groups and local pages. On one group, I was accused of suffering from what was called not in my backyard syndrome. On a different group, a person said, it's our own fault for having bought a home on the south side of town. What is important is that we have the support in our neighborhood, and our petition reflects and supports that. On February, or according to a news article written by Andrea Hunka of CBC News on September 19th, she wrote, in a media release, the city and Open Door acknowledged the community was not in favor of a downtown location due to past disruption of businesses and safety concerns. On February 28th, Andrea Hunka of CBC News also wrote an article where our Mayor Tyler Gandam was quoted to have said, we do, however, have a responsibility in ensuring the safety and well-being of all our citizens. I now ask you, Mayor Gandam and members of City Council, before you vote on this proposal, that you also remember that the people in my neighborhood of Linolta also deserve to live and work without fear and concern for their safety and well-being, and to be treated as fairly and with the same consideration as if this homeless shelter was being brought into your own neighborhoods, whether they be Aspen Ridge, Centennial, Garden Meadows, or Northmount. I ask you to consider your responsibility to all citizens of Wetaskiwin as you consider this proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. Michael Klaus.
Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of Unland Ventures, Inc. I've been asked to comment on any legal concerns regarding what's being proposed here. We'll try that. Is that better?
Perfect.
Have to excuse me, my Halloween costume dulls my voice. I'm here on behalf of Unland Ventures. I've been asked to convey any legal concerns regarding the proposal before City Council. I understand Mr. Unland will have some of his comments and concerns as well. So first of all, although Council clearly has the authority to redistrict a property within the City of Wetaskiwin, and in doing so, though, I'd suggest it has to follow the provisions and the intent of the city's own bylaws, as well as act reasonably and not being perceived as acting in bad faith or in an arbitrary or discriminatory manner. Draw your attention to section 6.271 sub 2 of the city bylaw. This includes what appears to be a policy statement in respect of a direct control zoning. It says this: as time progresses, land in the community evolves, particularly properties become into a state of transition where the redevelopment of land is subjective. While some of the buildings are in good condition and meet the desired intentions of the day. Any new development may require a change in use to meet the planning and development strategies for the future, as well as the present. These properties are generally in districts where they are surrounded by a myriad of other uses. Therefore, any development must be sensitive to several issues. On these properties, the city wants to remain open-minded and flexible, consider the comments of surrounding property owners, and meet the objectives of the key planning documents of the city. Now here, in redistricting a single lot in the middle of a block of otherwise occupied commercial properties does not appear to be the type of use the direct control zoning contemplated in the bylaw itself. Nothing is evolved in the neighborhood to suggest that redevelopment in any way is warranted. There is yet a further concern under the bylaws. The bylaw, when one considers the intended development of this property, namely as a temporary shelter service. Section 8.4 sub 2 of the city bylaw provides in part that, excuse me, it's the lovely mask. Temporary shelter services shall not be permitted on a site within 200 meters from any site with a residential zoning classification. So it's an irony here. Notice has gone to those within 76 meters in terms of the rezoning, but not to the people who ultimately be affected by the development that seems to be intended here. Also, it goes on and says, temporary shelter services shall not be permitted on a site within 100 meters of a site with an operating retail store. When one looks to the city zoning map, the surrounding area, to the block in which contemplated redistricting is considered, it would appear to have areas of residential zoning within the prohibited 200-meter distance. There may also be businesses in the block itself that may be operating as retail within the prohibited 100 meters. Having regard to the foregoing, I'd submit that in particular, redistricting and contemplation of a temporary shelter service would be contrary to the city's own land use bylaw. Adding to that concern, I also looked at some of the intervention of the courts in the past in situations similar to this. In a case out of Ontario or Manitoba called Miller and Charleswood, the court set aside an amendment to a bylaw to allow a fox farm on a particular property where the prior bylaw had prohibited same. The court found that the amendment of the bylaw concerned to be invalid because it was passed not in the public interest, but in the interest of a private individual, since it was passed to enable him to do something that was previously prohibited, and there was no public need for the change. An Ontario decision called Winston and Borough of North York. The court set aside an amendment of a bylaw to allow a church on a particular property where the prior bylaw had already allowed for a same. The court's rezoning, the court's reasoning was summarized in a head note as follows. When a bylaw is being attacked on the ground that is an arbitrary and discriminatory, it must be borne in mind that every zoning bylaw is, by its very nature, discriminatory. However, it is still open to attack a bylaw on the basis of discrimination in the sense that the bylaw has been enacted in bad faith. Bad faith is not simply not to imply or suggest any wrongdoing or personal advantage on the part of any member of council. Rather, it is to say the municipal council acted unreasonably and arbitrarily and without the degree of fairness, openness, and impartiality required of a municipal government.
I'll get you to wrap up here, please, Mr. Coase.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can supply a copy to council.
Okay, just leave it with our legislative. No. Mr. Unland? Welcome.
Thank you. Do I have to wear this? Because you won't be able to hear me. Your Worship, Mayor, Tyler, council members, members of the rest, good afternoon. And for those that don't know me, I'm Dale Unland, and I own the property at 5407 and 5409 36th Avenue. I've owned this property since 1993. My presentation is on behalf of myself, as well as Dave Morrow of Wetaskiwin Agencies, Nathan Bryton of Superbucks Pond and Wetaskiwin Pond, and Wendy LaValle of Wetaskiwin Laundromat, all who own their businesses and properties next to the proposed rezoning location. First of all, I want to commend council and administration for partnering with the Camrose Open Door organization in addressing the homeless and the addiction situation in our city. I personally have lived in and operated businesses in Wetaskiwin for the past 56 years. Wetaskiwin's been very good to me, and we do have a very beautiful city. We do have issues, but I would guess that every community does. During the first 20 years or so that I operated my businesses from this location, I had no issues whatsoever. But in the last few years, the issues have become very frequent and disturbing. And I'm sure that most of you are very aware of these issues. What we are against is the spot zoning of property and the location of the proposed development. When I sat on council for, I think it was around 9 years, we spent many meetings discussing the zoning of properties in our fine city. To spot zone a property in the middle of a specific zone, I do not believe is a good practice. If it was on the end of a specific zone and on a fringe area, then I could see it. But this is not the case in this situation. We bought our properties to operate our businesses, and specifically because it was zoned properly for our businesses. I know that we have issues in our community, and therefore the reason for the development proposed. On Thursday, I participated in a Zoom meeting put on by the Wetaskiwin Leduc Chambers of Commerce. And the presenter was Doug Griffiths of 13 Ways. And his presentation was about helping communities grow and how they need to adapt to changes. This was a very good presentation, and his best-selling book is 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. At this meeting, I asked the question of a homeless shelter in the community, and if it helps the community, and if so, where it should be located. He responded that a lot of our communities are faced with this same issue, and that it should be located in the middle or close to the middle of the community. I know that this was tried last year and it was not successful, but the problem is that if it would have been managed by an organization like the Open Door, I don't think we would have had the same problems that we had last year. One thing that I know, and most of us know, is that if we build it, they will come. Oh, I lost my spot here. One thing that I know, and most of us know, is if we build it, they will come. And therefore, I do not believe for 1 minute that this location and building is going to be big enough for what we need. The facility, I believe, will have to have private offices for counseling, medical staff, administration, security, as well as sufficient bathrooms and sleeping quarters and common areas. For a development that is so important to our community, I don't think should be rushed into. Let's plan and build a facility that will meet our needs for many years to come. A facility that our community will be proud of and serve the needs of those needing help. Again, our opposition is the spot zoning of properties and the particular location picked for this development. And I thank you for letting us present.
Thanks,
Thank you
Dale.
very much.
I have John and Marilyn McConnell.
Okay. Me and my wife have a property very close to that area. It's not 76 meters, which is kind of a small area to look at, but we have experienced a lot of violence as well. When I was looking at this, I had a lot of questions to ask. I did this as a question thing. I think it's a very good idea to have a homeless shelter. You know, it affects two groups of people, though. It affects the homeless people, and it affects the taxpayer. And as such, a lot of questions arise. So I was thinking of this, and I thought, well, how many people are actually currently homeless in this city? I know that's hard to figure out. How many people have addictions? No, of course, that's hard to figure out too. How many people have been physically, sexually, mentally abused? Those are good questions to ask and good reasons for a homeless shelter. But I have to ask why it hasn't been successful in the past. Because I know it's been tried several times. And will it be successful now? So the questions I thought of would be as follows. Were the residents of the area affected by a homeless shelter? Were they notified properly by phone or by mail? I don't think so. Certainly it's a high crime area, and we're not that far from it, and we've seen the crime and the effects of it, car thefts and cop cars called in a lot of times in our area. We're just behind the mall. Had to ask the question, was it properly researched? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if that's available. That may be a future thing. Is there a better alternative place? Well, several people I've talked to, and it didn't take very long, going down the businesses of that area, didn't think that that was a great idea. And I'm sure a lot of residences close to that will feel the same. Other questions were, what about 24-hour security? Homes in the area and businesses in the area could really use that security, especially because it's high crime. Would City Council be willing to install cameras to maybe reduce the crime? Let's see. A quick walk down the area of the businesses and in the mall and talking to people and listening to people who were talking and debating at the petition that was done in the mall opened up a lot of interesting things. Is the property value going to decrease? I'm sure it will. Will the over-stressed police force, and I applaud their work, but is that going to cause problems? Will they be going to have to make a decision going to the homeless shelter and dealing with people who have addictions and really bad situations, or going to a car accident? I don't know if that's fair for them. The homeless shelter before was closer to the police station. Maybe that was a good idea. If it's the Midas Minute Muffler place, which is a garage, is that going to be feasible? You know, the size is certainly a factor, as the other person mentioned. I'm not certain. My wife just wanted to ask a couple of questions in the time remaining. Is that okay?
Yep, you got a minute.
Yep.
Thank you. I can ramble, so I'm just going to read this quickly. We just had our taxes raised for road improvements. Now the homeless shelter is behind our house. Do we get a tax reduction? I asked the people here, how would they feel if this was their house? One example of a place that maybe they could try to buy instead, but I'm just guessing. There's a place across from PV Mart that's vacant. Barry Campbell is trying to sell it. It's a bunch of kind of vacant offices or something, but at least it's not in a residential area. And there's not a big mall there and a McDonald's and 2 liquor stores and stuff like that. And I just wanted to say, if they complained about the business, if the businesses complained downtown, why are they putting it by a bunch more businesses, like the mall and McDonald's and a residential area? There's a church, a Verizon Center, 2 liquor stores where a lot of homeless people sometimes hang out asking for money. And then if they do get drunk, then they sometimes end up in the mall parking lot. And they can get kind of wild. I just am saying it would be expensive to put it in the wrong place and then a year later have to put it in another place. And we don't want to waste that money. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you very much. I just want a note here before we leave here, before you folks leave, we're just going to get you to use the exit over there. Everybody's kind of moving in the same direction, if you don't mind. Mr. Bill Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, Council, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I am here as the chair of the board of the Horizon Center. And I'd like to start off by saying that Horizon Center did not start the petition. We did not endorse it, and it has nothing to do with us whatsoever. I would like to commend, as Dale Unland did, I guess it's because we're former councilors, but the city staff, the community volunteers, Camrose Open Door Association, and all the volunteers for what they've done to provide care for the homeless people in our community. I was a volunteer at the emergency shelter, and I am aware of the necessity for all of the marginalized persons to have 24/7 care, not just overnight. We appreciate that you are looking for a facility to provide housing and programming to assist, and that you have a very difficult decision to make. There is much community support for this, but nobody wants it in their backyard. We do not have all the information on this, as I don't think anybody in this room does. And as a potential neighbor, we have some concerns. The major concerns are the safety of our staff and our clients. And the second one is we are concerned, as has been shared with you, the ongoing problems of theft, property damage, sleeping on our property, and littering. The one question is, how will you ensure that our neighborhood is safe, secure, and clean? Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Dave Camage.
Hello, everyone. I guess I'm Dave Camage. I have a business on the south end of town. And coming here today, I was kind of in the support of all these, I guess the people I'm thinking of, as everyone calls them, the regulators. And they hang out on the south side of town. They affect my business and all the businesses around me. So I was in support of having it on the south end of town, but actually after hearing all this, the zoning, and I'm kind of torn on, okay, is this the right place? I guess what I'd like to say is I've been trying to go around and I've been using the RCMP complaint line every time I find these guys drinking in public, which is daily, basically. I've been phoning the RCMP complaint line. And I think if 1,000 people in Wetaskiwin did that, they would get caught every time they're doing something wrong, and they would end up leaving. So, because I think these guys would be hanging out at the homeless shelter, which I know for a fact not all of them, most of them have homes. They just hang out in town to drink with their buddies. My neighbor's an RCMP. We talk to these guys. They try to come in my store all the time. So I guess we're here for this building. I'm kind of 50-50 on the support. I was coming in here to be positive on choice, but after hearing some good points, I'm kind of 50-50. I do believe it should be on the south side of town somewhere, because these are where these people are hanging out. But I do challenge everyone here. There's a RCMP complaint line, and whenever you see anyone doing anything illegal, drinking or littering, I got the phone number in my pocket. I've called it. They've been nothing but happy to receive my calls, and they've responded. And I think if we all did that, the crime rate would go down around here. So that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Inspector Durant, 780-312-7267. So, and I echo Dave's remarks. As I encourage everybody here that if you do see something that isn't right, a crime being committed, that you do make those complaints. It's important that we do that as a community. I mean, we're not going to get any better if we're not working together. Bernie Feets.
Your Honor, Mayor, City Council, audience. I identify myself as Bernie Feets and a resident on 53rd Street. It totally confuses and irritates me that the council members of the City of Wetaskiwin and Family Community Services are so concerned about providing a shelter for persons who find their way into Wetaskiwin, choose to hang out and live on the streets of Wetaskiwin, but yet cannot find their way out of Wetaskiwin, when in fact we have such limited opportunities to shop for necessities in Wetaskiwin as it is. One cannot buy a gentleman's suit, one cannot buy a lady's dress, one cannot buy a decent pair of shoes. We have no facilities to buy any office equipment or furniture. One can barely find ink for a printer. We have to go to Leduc or Camrose, to Staples, or even Edmonton, Red Deer. We do indeed have an oversupply of liquor outlets, pawn shops, cannabis shops. So I guess that tells me where we are expected to shop. When the virus crisis began, the aforementioned businesses were never forced to close. They were considered essential, whereas personal hygiene and care businesses such as barbers, chiropractors, etc., were closed for months. The City Council of Wetaskiwin did not seem to support these businesses to keep them open. No one pays my gas bill to keep me warm. No one pays my electric bill to give me light. No one pays for my food or my groceries. Why should I or any resident of Wetaskiwin pay for these items for persons who don't do a single thing for the betterment of Wetaskiwin? Why are we so, well, the only word I can think of is dumb, to hang out more welcome signs with more food bank supports, soup kitchens, everything. And I have heard them say, well, let's go to Wetaskiwin. We get lots of free things in Wetaskiwin. It is time to say enough is enough. It's time for us to say you are not welcome. Go back to wherever you came from. I live on 53rd Street, and that's a main artillery road through town from 36th Avenue. And repeatedly, I find nothing but garbage, not only on my lawn, but surrounding many lawns. Not only from fast food stores or fast food places, like containers and garbage. We find cigarettes, we find cigar butts, we even find multiple times we find masks thrown all over our lawns, which does nothing to improve the value of our property. It's time that we tell these people that the same road that brought you into Wetaskiwin will also take you out of Wetaskiwin. Regardless of the time of day or night, I honestly do not feel safe driving anywhere in Wetaskiwin. I keep a very vigilant watch around me. I have numerous times had things hurled at my vehicle, but for fear of whoever is hurling these things at me, I just keep driving and I'll stop maybe 4 or 5 blocks down the street and then get out and clean my windshield or my window or whatever portion of my vehicle the item has hit. About 2 months ago, my 97-year-old cousin and her son, they were entering the south entrance to Safeway and something was hurled at their vehicle. They stopped and the son got out and said, "What do you think you're doing?" And he got bear sprayed. It took him 5 hours to recover that he could go back to Red Deer. Most uncalled for. No shelter, and eventually,
Thank you, Bernie.
if
That's
we
your
have
time.
no shelter, we would have
Thank you,
no
Bernie.
street
That's your
livers.
time.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, the city didn't close any of the businesses. Those were all provincially mandated. I have Roberto Noche, who will be joining us through Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before I begin, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. And good afternoon, members of council. My name is Robert Noche, and I'm a lawyer with the law firm of Miller Thompson. And I am the lawyer for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Canada, which owns lands located at 5410 36th Avenue, directly across the street from the proposed site. You will hear not only myself, but Mr. Daniel Dick, who's the counselor to president of the church area, including Wetaskiwin, speak on behalf of the church. But I want to focus my remarks tonight to deal with a number of procedural issues and some planning considerations that council should consider before making a decision. First and foremost, there are a number of procedural issues with respect to this rezoning application. As confirmed by your administration, the church did not receive proper and timely notice of this public hearing. And as a result, the church has not had the opportunity to assess the proposed redistricting application, nor the impact on the church and the surrounding properties. City Council's decision in considering this bylaw affects the rights, privileges, and interests of the church and is then thus subject to a duty of fairness. And when rezoning a parcel of land, City Council is engaged in a quasi-judicial function. And as a result of that, these decisions that Council makes requires a high standard of procedural fairness. The church takes the position that the city's failure to provide proper and timely notice of this public hearing is a breach of fairness and natural justice. Furthermore, when you look at the direct control bylaw, the proposed direct control bylaw, I say with respect that it is very difficult to understand or even review. It fails to address any of the planning objectives. It is in clear breach of section 8.4, sub 2, sub B, and sub C of your own land use bylaw. You are breaking the law if you pass this bylaw. And the church takes the position that the proposed direct control bylaw is void for vagueness and uncertainty. As well, we're also concerned about the open-mindedness of council on this decision. With respect, the public hearing appears to be a mere formality, and that council does not appear to have an open mind, having already decided to fund the project and targeting a November 1st, 2020 opening date, some mere 5 days away from this public hearing. As a result of that, and as stated by our Alberta Court of Appeal in a decision from 2013, that council needs to be aware of an attitudinal and behavioral aspect with respect to their impartiality. For that reason, as explained by our Court of Appeal, part of the analysis is to consider whether a reasonable person could have the confidence that council would approach the matter with an open mind. There are a number of planning issues at play here, and you've heard a number of residents address those issues, and I cannot even come close to matching their passion for the community and the concerns they've raised, and they're genuine, from safety issues to ensuring the safety of residents in the neighborhood, crime, vandalism, property damage, all of the things that are genuine planning considerations. And I must say as well, as a former city councillor in the city of Edmonton, that if I were to receive a petition of 100 people, over 100 people, on a very specific zoning, I would take notice of that. That is very significant that so many residents would express their concerns and put their name on a piece of paper in that regard. And I was also moved by the chair of the Horizon Center, who spoke passionately about the need of a homeless shelter and a temporary shelter, but he raised genuine planning issues. And what is the common theme here throughout the presentation is the lack of communication and the lack of involvement in the community. And when I read the report, when I read the request for decision report that was submitted to council, and it says this, and I quote, "After consultation between Open Door and the surrounding community, administration is of the opinion that this location is appropriate for the defined use and will not significantly impact the land use." When I asked who the community was, I didn't get an answer from. And when I'm hearing what I'm hearing tonight, there was no real meaningful community consultation. So I'm curious to know which surrounding community, when even the adjacent property owners were never engaged, were never involved. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I've raised a number of procedural issues that are real. I've informed my client that if the rezoning application is approved tonight, that I would recommend an application in court immediately to challenge and quash the bylaw for a number of the procedural issues that I've identified for council tonight. That will be a decision that my client will have to make. But the procedural issues are real, and I have recommended that if council proceeds on this, I will recommend that we proceed to not only quash the bylaw, but seek an immediate injunction.
Thank you, Mr. Noche. That'll be your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Daniel Dick.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Daniel Dick. I'm a success coach at Wetaskiwin Composite High School, and I own a roofing business, Dick Contracting, here in Wetaskiwin. I grew up by Gwyn and attended the same high school that I currently teach at. I've lived in the city of Wetaskiwin for the last 15 years with my wife Amanda and my children Jason and Kira. I'm currently serving as first counselor in the Edmonton Gateway Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I help to oversee 11 churches in South Edmonton and surrounding areas, one of which is Wetaskiwin. Prior to this position, I served as bishop of this church at 36th Ave in Wetaskiwin from November 2014 to December 2019. I've also been a leader over our youth groups previous to this, among other things. I have a great love for the people of the city of Wetaskiwin. I appreciate our city council and the hard work and dedication they put into the work that they do. This is often filled with opposition similar to today. Throughout the past week, I've met and talked with individuals regarding the 24/7 integrated support hub. Responses to this have varied from absolute and total support to medium support and also to very little support. This puts me in a difficult position and the big reason I am here. My work with those living in indigent circumstances here in the city is varied. Many individuals, especially during my time as bishop, would come into the church asking for time, food, and/or money. These individuals were always treated with love and respect as we tried and continue to try to follow the example of our Savior Jesus Christ. I sat with them, discussed issues that they had, and prayed with them and for them and their families. They often shared very difficult things their loved ones were going through. We offered different services, including an addiction recovery program and rides home as needed. This has always been a part of the area of the city that the church is in. My greatest concern with the hub in the area would be the issues the city dealt with in regard to the previous homeless shelters. I won't go into detail as they've already been talked about in detail. The church does not normally lock its doors normally when in use. The past few years, we unfortunately have had some instances that have necessitated a doorbell system being utilized. This is because our building is not staffed throughout the days, and we do not have the ability to supervise groups who may wish to utilize different areas of the church that are available, for instance, on Sunday mornings. We have an unpaid clergy, and as such, many work during the week. We are pleased to see a model where individuals would not be forced to leave every day. The safety of our congregation and those in the surrounding community is very important to us, and we take great pride in the area of the city we are a part of. We are looking to be good neighbors. We would like assurances that if the hub proceeds in the proposed location, that we also will have recourse in having our complaints heard, especially regarding safety, since we are further from necessary safety services than the shelter has been in years past. I do wonder if all locations were considered in relation to police, fire, and hospital services. I do not feel the need to belabor this point today, since you've received many letters and we've heard many things here today. Regardless of where this is located, we as a congregation would like to be a part of these efforts in a positive way. We are asking that our concerns are adequately addressed prior to any official announcement. This concludes my remarks, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Was there anyone else that was wishing to be heard? Anyone else wishing to be heard? And third and final, anyone else wishing to be heard? You've already spoke, sorry. Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for their presentations at this hearing. Council will discuss the debate on this matter later in the agenda, and I declare this public hearing closed at 5:04 p.m. The bylaw is considered as an agenda item later in this council meeting. Item 7A, bylaw 1974-20 to redistrict lot 2C, block 56, plan 872163, C3 to direct control. Andrew?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is going to be second reading of the bylaw. I will just go through the report again. This is, the proposed location is legally described as lot 2C, block 56, plan 8721263 at 5417 36th Avenue, which is currently zone C3 which is highway commercial. The proposed use would be defined in the city's land use bylaw as a temporary shelter service, which is not allowable in the C3 district. Therefore, redistricting will be required before a development permit can be issued. As discussed, the temporary shelter services would be the closest definition for this use. The direct control district that is proposed would allow council to have control over any development permit that is brought to that location. Considering that this use is a unique one, this would be the most appropriate zoning for this location. The notification history has been discussed already and is laid out before you. In this case, the recommended motion is to give second reading to bylaw 1974-20. And if council has any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Sure, thank you. I'll entertain a motion and then we can start with questions.
I move that council give second reading to bylaw 1974-20.
Moved by Councillor Lonsdale. Give me 1 second to get some paper ready here. Questions? Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you. There's been a number of representatives today speak to the notification process. So I want to make sure that the notification process meets requirements.
Just make sure your mic's on too.
Sorry? Is that not on? Sorry.
That's it. Okay.
So I'd like to know that notification process has been looked after properly.
In my opinion, the notification, we did go above and beyond many of the aspects of the Municipal Government Act's requirements, although the requirements that are there were not fully met.
Can you clarify? Sorry, can you clarify that?
Just that the Municipal Government Act allows for or requires that notification be posted for 2 consecutive weeks in a publication or the newspaper. So it wasn't posted for 2 weeks in the newspaper, but it was posted on the city's website. Whether the city's website would be considered a publication without an advertising bylaw is not clear.
Okay. But there was also, Andrew, there was also a number of speakers that spoke to, there was one speaker that spoke to the business of an existing city bylaw about 200 meters from residential and 100 meters within a site of a business. Can you comment on that?
That is the district or the use regulations for the temporary shelter district. So in this case, since the zoning would be direct control, those regulations don't directly apply, but they are useful to use as guidance.
So once under direct control, those requirements disappear.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Then any development decision would be up to council.
I'll stand down for now.
Councillor Billingsley.
One of the speakers today said had some concerns that we had made up our mind before we came today, and personally, that isn't the case. I appreciate everybody that came here today to give some insight, and it certainly has weighted quite heavily on the decision that we're going to have to make. I do have some concerns about the process myself, in the sense that there sure seems to be, from the people that did present, we're not very happy with the communication. Now, whether that is the city's fault or the residents' fault, who's to say at this point? But obviously there is an issue. We had talked about when we gave the $90,000 to the Open Door that it was going to be at a location that was suitable to council. And there are some speakers, including Dan, who had said that safety for the church, and didn't see that there was any avenue for consideration if there is indeed problems. There is no public consultation from Open Door to the surrounding community, and I do have some concerns with it's in your backyard, right? And so for that reason, I definitely have some concerns. And this is not going to be an easy decision to make.
Councillor Hillgartner.
Well, I'd like to thank the community for attending our open mic, because this is what it's all about, for council to help make decisions. When the community doesn't get involved, the council is sort of out in nowhere trying to make decisions. So when the community comes and puts forward their opinions, that makes a big difference. Through the chair to Sue, have we received the petition of 100?
Through the chair to Councillor Hillgartner, I have received it.
Thank you. So that'll wave into our decisions too, my personal decision. Thank you.
Councillor Bronco.
Thank you, Tyler. Couple of questions. One, we keep mentioning it's a temporary shelter. In your views, what do you mean by temporary?
Sorry, to clarify, so in my analysis of the land use planning considerations in this case, I compared the proposed use to all of the defined uses in the land use bylaw, and this would be the closest one. So it may not exactly fit. I guess the important point is that it would not fit under the current zoning. And so we need to change the zoning somehow. And so given that this use doesn't quite fit the definition of the temporary shelter service and doesn't fit any other use, then direct control isn't the best way to go forward.
And also, I may hearing a couple, especially the lawyer for the church, if we go ahead with this, he's going to appeal it. Does that put a halt to anything that we do, or because it'll be a legal matter now, and obviously before the courts we can't do nothing? Am I correct?
I am actually not, I'm not sure about the process if that were to happen. So maybe you have more information.
Through the chair, Councillor Bronco, I think we would need to get legal advice on that.
Okay, since we're getting legal advice on that, my other question is, my last question. We have a petition. What's the percentage of that petition that needs to defeat this motion?
Through the chair to Councillor Bronco, a petition on a land use bylaw is not valid. It doesn't matter the number of people.
Does that cover you, Councillor Bronco?
Yes,
Councillor Alonso.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'd love to thank everybody for coming here today. This is not a decision we take lightly. I have many more questions today about the process and about legality as to the decision we're about to make. I fully support an integrated hub. It is something that has been needed in this community, and it has been a priority of this council administration for the last 3 years. I think we've done a great thing in partnering with Open Door to Camrose. We don't know how to run a homeless shelter. That's the business they're in. And we receive quarterly reports from the RCMP every quarter. And in the time the shelter was open before, it was proven that there was less calls to service in the RCMP, less visits to the hospital, and even though it was limited to success, it was going in the right direction. Wherever we agree on to put a shelter, we're not going to please everybody. So I guess my question is, and I think Councillor Bronco kind of alluded to it, is have we had the time to look into, Andrew, I guess I can direct this to you, sir, through the chair, to the legality of a decision we're about to make? Or is more time required to check that out?
Yeah, I think I would want to get legal counsel on that as well.
Okay.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. I think pretty much the entire community, or almost all the community, believes that this community needs a shelter. After the discussion that's happened today, I'm not 100% convinced that this is the right location, or enough input has been given that this is the right location. Which is really difficult in the sense that it is starting to get cold out. And these poor folks are going to have, they need to be somewhere. Kind of damned if we do and we're damned if we don't.
Councillor Blatz-Morgan.
Yeah, this is a really tough decision. I also want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and showing what your concerns are. That's really important for our community to do, especially on decisions like this, is having your voices heard. And I really commend all of you for coming out tonight. My issue is the fact that I don't think that there will ever be a perfect location for this, no matter where we put this. We had issues, as everybody has alluded to, with the last location of the homeless shelter. This one will be a completely different facility run by people that know how to run this, and it's going to be 24/7 support, so it's not just an overnight shelter. This is going to have supports for the community. It's going to have various social services, and it's going to be 24/7 that they will be open, as well as having a crisis team in case there are issues, so that then they can tackle those issues. So it will be a completely different run facility. My issue is the fact that on Saturday night, it got down to -17. There's snow on the ground as it is. And no matter what decision we come out of here with, we need to figure out what we're doing with these people, because we need to make sure that our most vulnerable are looked after, whether it be through this facility or a temporary facility until we can get a permanent facility in place and look at more options. But the issue is that we still need, we have the need to look after these people. They are in our city and we need to look after these people. And I am not comfortable with saying that we should put this off for 2 weeks and let these people freeze outside for 2 weeks. So we do need to come to a decision, of course, but I would love to see some options for a temporary facility in the meantime, in the event that we do decide that we will not go forward with this location.
Councillor Nielsen.
Actually, I came to this meeting with a decision in my mind, for many of the same reasons that Councillor Blatz-Morgan is speaking about. I believe we have a responsibility to put people up when we get the opportunity to ensure their well-being. I think all councils are, and most of these leaders as well. But an issue that's transpired today, in my mind, and the first one is a lot of concerns expressed about the notification process, which I guess we can have all sorts of.
Speak on the mic, Councillor Nielsen.
Sorry. Which we can have all sorts of debates about. The one thing I guess that resonated with me was a comment that Daniel Dick made when he talked about wanting to work to a long-term solution, but give us an opportunity to examine how we're going to mitigate or deal with everyone's safety concerns. And this council has been, and this administration has been very consistent in wanting to ensure good communication. We've tried to reach out and engage the community in a number of discussions, with some limited success, I might add. Like Gabrielle, I'm concerned that if we lose this opportunity, we'll be back to square one, scrambling to try and find a way to
helping lift people up. But I am, contrary to how I came in, I am going to vote no on the second reading, because I believe we need to do more work to ensure that if this is the location, or perhaps for any other location, that we have adequately examined people's concerns about safety in their neighborhoods. And I think we have missed some opportunities in that area. I will be voting no against this motion, but still have grave reservations about how we deal with the next couple of months, next couple of weeks with regard to our vulnerable population. Thank you.
Councilor Bronco.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just like to reinforce some of my colleagues. This is a decision that's very tough, but we said we'd be opening November 1st, which won't happen. The people in the community. But what's very tough too and hard is we're here to work for you people. But we can't just listen to one without listening to the people who elected. We work for you guys. Yeah. I'm also going to be voting no on this on the second reading because you're the people who elected us. Sometime in our life we have to listen to you, and I think this is one. Thank you.
Anything else? So I'd like to thank everybody for coming today to take the time to be heard as well as be engaged in our community. I wish we had a lot more of this, and I wish that it wouldn't take something like an issue like this to get the community involved. So maybe going forward, I hope that this is your time to shine, I guess, to be involved in the community and help shape it for how you'd like to see it going forward. So the number of concerns that were brought forward of what residents and businesses are facing currently is the very reason we are in desperate need of an integrated support hub. 24-hour programming and counseling, working towards an outreach aspect where you're not calling the RCMP if you see somebody who's publicly intoxicated or struggling, to have that outreach worker to be able to bring that individual back to the integrated support hub where they can get the mental or the counseling or the social programming that would be available to them. And that's tending to the needs of our vulnerable population. If you're homeless or need help in my city, you're my responsibility. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what your story is. I don't care why it is that you don't have a place to go. You are still my responsibility. When we had the homeless shelter, the temporary emergency shelter set up the last 2 winters, statistically, RCMP calls for service for public intox or unlawful use of or enjoyment of an area, loitering, any of the other issues that we're seeing as a community, for the very reason that we have this support hub being put in place, we're cut in half. 50% of those calls. 50% of the overnight stays in cells were also gone. Calls for service from EMS and fire were significantly reduced as well. Not responding to somebody who is passed out in a park or next to a business. The overnight stays or the calls for service with our hospital were also significantly reduced. So while I hear you loud and clear, your concerns and moving forward, I am very disappointed in the social media backlash on the city partnering with an organization to open up something that seems to be probably the biggest issue that we face in the city. So to say that I'm disappointed is probably an understatement. We're never going to find a perfect location to set up help for those in need. And I will absolutely be voting in favor of this for the second reading. We have spent months trying to put together a shelter that had the 24-hour supports in place. There were a number of sites that were looked at, plenty of communication with our administration, as well as the needs of the community. So I was really excited to see something being put together for our community that would address the very concerns that I heard a number of you say, and a number that I read through social media on what we need to start tackling here in the community. That's it. Second reading. Those in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Councillor Blatz Morgan.
I have a question.
True.
If I wanted to make a subsequent motion, can I do that now?
Absolutely.
Okay. I move that City Council directs administration to bring back options for a temporary location while Open Door searches for a new location.
Can
You
send
want
that
one
to
more
her?
time?
Yeah.
I move that City Council directs administration to bring back options for a temporary location while Open Door searches for a new location.
Moved by Councillor Blatz Morgan. Any discussion?
Sue has a question.
Sue?
To the chair, I'm a little bit concerned of tying a motion to something that the Open Door is doing. We don't have anything really to do with their business. We don't know if they're going to find a new location. So if the motion could just be that administration looks for a temporary location, that could be for the whole winter.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's okay.
Okay. Councillor Billingsley. Yep.
The only problem with that is the way it's worded is we're back in the shelter business. And when Open Door came to us, they were interested in finding a one-stop shop or a complete shelter, whatever you want to call it. And we didn't know what the location is. So I'm wondering if it couldn't go back the way it was in your original motion. Because we gave the $90,000 to Open Door, go find a location. And part of it was, it's got to be a suitable location to council. As it turned out, it wasn't suitable. So I don't know necessarily, do we need to have this other motion? Like,
We do if we want a temporary shelter in place, and that's the
so
motion on the floor.
So you're not saying anything to do with Open Door. You're saying we need something open ASAP.
That's my issue, is the fact that we don't know how long it's going to take for Open Door to find a new location. We also don't know if they will find a new location, and we'll also have to go through a public hearing process again. And so let's say that we end up with the same situation where all the residents from that part of the community come in, and then we decide that we don't want to have it there either. I'm concerned that this is going to take us months at this point. So I feel like we need something temporary in place, whether it's perfect or not. I think that we need to make sure that our most vulnerable is looked after in any way we can right now. And I know that that's not something that we wanted to get back into, but I feel like, unfortunately, in my opinion, I feel like we need to do something to help these people.
Councillor Bronco.
Thank you, Tyler. One of the questions, since this was going this way, what happens to the financial support engagement? Not going ahead and give that back, or we leave it with them? That's, I don't know. Are they going to take this and go look for another location, or do we use that money to help support another location? If we're going to do it, or look, administration's going to look after it.
Sue?
Through the chair to Councilor Bronco, that motion has already been approved, and although the date was November 1st, I think it was pretty fluid that the 24/7 support site could, when it was open, we would give that money. So that unless there's a motion to revoke that money, that's going to stay with them. The one concern, I know I'm overstepping a little bit here, the one concern I have as well is we need to, as administration, look, because our land use bylaw is very old and outdated. And if we were to apply the same restrictions that was brought up by the church of the 200 meters, we might not have a location in the city that actually meets the intent of that bylaw. So this could be a challenge for us even to find a temporary location if we're relying on an old land use bylaw term.
Councilor Nielsen.
Well, I don't like the idea of it being a new location because in spite of my not voting to support it, I'm not convinced that this is not the right location. What I am convinced of is that we haven't done enough to alleviate business and residents' concerns about it being located there, that there hasn't been enough communication. There hasn't been perhaps enough consultation and planning. I heard very loud and clear from Dan Dick in the LDS Church that they weren't opposed to its location, but they were opposed to no one helping them address their safety concerns. So I'm not personally convinced that Open Door has to find a new location, because it still may be the best location. I'm just not convinced that enough work has necessarily been done to put plans in place to ensure that when we ask the neighborhood to embrace this decision, that we've assured them by doing so, it will make their neighborhood safe. Like Tyler, in spite of the fact we voted differently on this, I believe that when our community embraces the concept of a 24/7 shelter and hub, that our community in the long run will be a safer place. And we will have done the right things morally and ethically to support the vulnerable populations. So I'd like to see the motion read that directs administration to bring back options for a temporary shelter. And this may change the motion, Your Worship, and continue to work with Open Door to ensure the long-term viability of a 24/7 center, shelter, whatever. But that may change the intention of the motion.
So because there's already a motion on the floor to be working with Open Door on a shelter location, this has nothing to do with the temporary shelter location moved by Councilor Blatz-Morgan.
No, I would agree, except that it doesn't necessarily preclude excluding Open Door in running a temporary shelter that we establish.
But the administration is going to bring back options is what the motion is. We don't have to be specific on who they're going to bring back options with.
Fair enough.
Anything else? Councilor Bronco.
Thank you, Tyler. So on the motion that Sue said about the financial with Open Doors, if we leave it as it is, they're operating, got to have an open by November 1st. If they can't find anything, and if we don't make a motion to return that money, we basically wear out that money.
No.
No, you have to make a shelter.
They have to make a shelter. But if they thought this was the location, and they can't get the location.
That wasn't the location in mind when the motion was passed. And the November 1st was a target date. It wasn't an absolute. We had that discussion when we made that motion. To the motion. Councilor Nielsen.
So is the council's, with this motion being on the floor, it becomes very clear that this location is unacceptable.
No, we're looking for options on a temporary shelter.
But this motion says, while open door searches for a new location.
No, see, and I don't think that that should be in there either.
Okay.
We need a date for when administration is going to bring back the information, and we're just looking for options on a temporary shelter.
So you guys strike for new
There's
location.
still, yeah, there's still a motion on, there's an active motion right now that has the open door operating a integrated support hub.
Then can we have this particular motion that Councilor Blatz Morgan brought forward, can we have that amended to strike while open door searches for new location?
Yes, and I think that that changes the motion, so we'll vote on that amendment, and then we'll go back to the motion. So to the amendment, taking out open door searches for new location. In favor? Opposed? Carried. Back to the motion. Anything further? Can you include a date with that, Councillor Blatz Morgan?
That's the issue. Like I said, now we're going at it for another 2 weeks. So if we bring it back for November 9th, then that's 2 more weeks of not having anything for these people. So I guess, Sue, what is realistic?
Through the chair to Councillor Morgan, or Blatz Morgan, the 9th is the next meeting unless council wants to call a special meeting to address this.
Can administration have the information for a special meeting? We struggled with getting a shelter location and getting this put together over the last 3 months. I struggle seeing how we're going to find a suitable temporary shelter in the next week or two, or within 2 weeks.
My fear is that if we are following the strictest rule that was brought up here, we will not find a location that meets. So we will come back with options for council on potentially what are the least disruptive to the community, I guess. The problem is the other locations that we've looked at will, instead of residents here, we'll have businesses here the next time. So.
Councillor Billingsley.
So if the motion ends up having date of the 9th, by the 9th, it's entirely possible if we have the information before that we could have a
special council meeting?
Yes.
Is that okay, Councillor Blatz Morgan?
Yeah, that's fine.
Anything further? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Item 7B, Fire Service Bylaw number 1872, amendment. Maybe we'll take a 10-minute break.
Sure.
Folks here got any spine-tingling ideas for a location, speak up. You know where to find me. Bernie, can you just step back a little bit, please?
Okay, they wanted to book the initial earlier.
Oh, no, it was acceptable. We never saw it. Yeah. We ever get audition. Yeah, that's why I go, no.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Huh? Well, they should change. Well, yeah. But that's because it was forced. We didn't know it was going. And it was supposed to be temporary. Good day. How are you? So where were you when the fire started in here? You were watching.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah. Well, it's good. I like to see people pay attention to the law.
5. Added agenda item presentation from the open door. I need 2/3 consent. Those in favor? Carried. Welcome, Ms. Hudson.
You can sit at the desk if you want to.
All right. Good evening. Just put some notes together here quickly. Just in response to why we didn't speak, this is a City of Wetaskiwin zoning issue, not an open door issue. So we were not prepared to speak to a City of Wetaskiwin zoning issue that does not involve us on a building that we have not purchased, and we have an offer that will be pulled on. We were prepared to invest in the community through a purchase of a property. Obviously now we're not going to be interested in doing so. And we'll look to the City of Wetaskiwin to help us to find a location that would be suitable based on the zoning issues that clearly exist. One thing I just wanted to really clarify quite strongly is this is not a homeless shelter. This is a 24/7 integrated hub, and it is not just going to be a homeless shelter. If it was a homeless shelter, we would be kindly provided funding from the province of Alberta, and we wouldn't be scrambling to find funding right now. We did consult with community partners in terms of organizations that are highly impacted by this kind of work. That included the RCMP, Alberta Addictions and Mental Health, multiple different stakeholders who would actually have a lot of input on how we would provide these supports. We have staff ready to go. We have funding ready to go. We have a plan. We have a phone number. We have everything ready to go for November 1st. And our intention is to still start something November 1st because that's what we committed to. We did not commit to the actual beds part because we knew that might be an issue. We committed to an integrated hub starting November 1st, and we will stay with our promise of doing so. What that looks like right now will have to be determined by location. I can currently have staff carrying a phone and responding as we need to, but obviously without a place for beds, I don't know what that's going to look like. My proposal would be that we look at something along the lines of either ATCO trailers or the Civic building. And I know that that doesn't want to come back onto the table, but those are the only two things I can think of off the top of my head to actually provide beds immediately right now. So those are the two options that we have. We are fully prepared to stay and do something. We committed to that. We will do something. We will provide services. However, in terms of investing long-term in the community, I think we've been given a pretty clear indication tonight that we need to perhaps back that piece off and wait to see what we're able to do in the City of Wetaskiwin or what we're able to build before we go investing in the community. So I will absolutely I am prepared and will continue to move forward with providing services here. However, I will look to the City of Wetaskiwin to determine where we're putting this facility and how we're actually going to operate it if zoning is going to become such an issue. So I think our two best bets might be the Civic building or ATCO trailers. And if that's the case, we're going to, something like ATCO trailers is going to incur a massive cost, and I don't know where we would find that funding and who would put that bill. But those are the only two things I can put on the table. So I'm happy to field questions right now. With how we're going to unroll this or what this looks like, but that's all I have for you tonight.
Entertain a motion to accept this information, and then I'll take questions. Councillor Lonsdale.
I move to City Council accept as information in the report from Jessica of Cameras Open Door.
Zoning precludes us from using the Civic building.
Okay.
Any questions? Councillor Nielsen.
Mine isn't a question, mine's a comment. Earlier today, in our committee of the whole, we had RCMP here giving us their monthly shtick. And one of the questions I posed to him is, given the recommendation for the location to the integrated hub, do the RCMP have any special plans, circumstances, how they're going to mitigate concerns for the area? And the response we got was, as we get calls and as we see issues, we will address them. I think everyone recognizes I'm going to use the word volatility. It's the wrong word, but the volatility of the shelter, the integrated hub in a community. And I'm still not convinced that it's not the right location, although the vote here was 4-3. I think personally, and I don't know how much responsibility the city has versus you as a private operator has in the communication regarding mitigating safety concerns. I don't believe that we're going to be able to convince most of the people who are here tonight that it's a good place for the hub to go. But I would have been very much more comfortable supporting the motion if we, whoever we is, had made some really concerted efforts with the RCMP, with bylaw, with whomever, to at least say, we've reached out and here's some of the solutions we've talked about, and here's some of the ways that we can work with the community, and all the rest of it. That would have made me more comfortable just making a decision to put the hub in that location. So, as I said, Jessica, I'm not convinced it's not the best location. As a matter of fact, I came in here tonight fully ready to support it. So I would hope that doesn't necessarily come off the table in terms of options. But I do think that we collectively have some work to do to have a safety plan in place regardless of where it goes. Because regardless of where it goes, there's going to be a room full of 50 people talking about their safety. And so I think that's important. And I don't want to assume that you haven't done anything on that front. You may well have. But as a councillor making a decision tonight, I wasn't privy to all the steps that you've taken in that regard. So anyway, my comment is, I'm not sure that location is necessarily off the table as far as I'm concerned.
So I guess to speak to 2 points there, at this point, it would be beyond risky for our organization to consider that property based on, we basically saw a lawyer tonight threaten to come after if we do that. So if I go ahead with a purchase of that property right now, I'm held up and can do nothing with that property, meaning I can't leverage it to get the funding that I would need to do what I wanted to do with that building. So it has to be off the table. We can't sit with a pending offer forever and ever. We've already had to extend our pending offer to deal with the last 2 weeks. The secondary piece of that in terms of the communication factor, yes, we have absolutely done that, but I actually need time to put that together. And this zoning issue came just at the time that we were rolling some of that out, and it took everything off the table. And unfortunately, what it did was it put us as the open door in a position where it looked like we were trying to slide something through and not be transparent. So I've spent the last 2 weeks dealing with that community backlash in terms of our own as open door, people coming after us for what had nothing to do with us, which is why we very strategically did not speak tonight, because it is a city-led bylaw change in terms of zoning, or city-led zoning change that had, we didn't ask for it, and it pulled us into the middle of something. So in terms of how we would have actually rolled out if we would have just purchased that building as is, and then what our intention was, which is the same thing that we've done multiple times before, we would have approached it very differently and rolled things out very differently and had a plan in place to deal with some of this. People don't know what they don't know. Given half a chance to start something and actually show and prove what the results were, would have made a monumental difference. And now that it was outed, we couldn't get ahead of that. No matter what we said, we couldn't get ahead of that. And so that's where we've landed tonight, that we've had plenty of communication and we know exactly how it's going to roll out. And we are also an agency with accredited policies and procedures and everything in place, but we weren't even given a chance to roll that out because the community turned on us before we could even get that information out.
In response to the legal threat, if you will, There was two pieces to that. There was the LDS lawyer speaking about, if this thing passes, here's what I'll do, recommend. And then former bishop and now director saying, at no point in his presentation did he ever talk about being opposed to the center, only about working with to create a safe environment for everybody concerned. You don't think that that comment mitigates some of the statements from the lawyer?
From a not-for-profit standpoint, in terms of what we look at to weigh risk against being able to, risk against reward, essentially, if we know that there is somebody with a threat at that level against a building, it would absolutely not be in our best interest to pursue that, because we're not interested in being dragged into the middle or having our work on a building stop and wait for a zoning change. So if we know right now that we can't do anything with that building, then buying that building is off the table, because what I need to do is I need to be able to purchase the building, and then I need to be able to leverage that, as we do with our purchase properties, to be able to get the funding needed to do the renos that we need to do, which is all accessible. All of that is accessible in terms of monumental amounts of money to do renos. But I can't do that with a pending zoning change on that may or may not take forever to go through the courts. So it's too much of a risk.
So then what would have happened, Jessica, had this motion been approved, but the threat of the lawyer was still hanging overhead?
We would have had to have a conversation about what that looked like.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hillgartner.
The city operates an integrated hub,
correct?
So that's not really a homeless society.
You're correct.
Would it be more meant to be a clinic to help people and mental illness?
So an integrated hub provides everything that you possibly need for holistic. So holistic meaning physical, medical, mental health, spiritual, cultural, all of those practices. So an integrated hub basically serves you holistically, wrap around everything you need, because we know that just simply housing somebody or dealing with one issue just puts them back into the system. So I just was sketching out here too. For example, the individuals who are ready to come to the table to work with us in the hub is Solicitor General Office, who is going to be bringing a brand new program in that they've been waiting to try to bring into Wetaskiwin, that is going to specifically target prolific offenders, working with us and the police force and all of us at the integrated hub table in order to finally respond to what we're seeing in terms of the crime in Wetaskiwin. So we have a huge program coming in terms of Solicitor General. The Primary Care Network has committed a nurse practitioner and a behavior health consultant. So we're going to be able to deal with the medical needs that we're seeing. We also have the policing that is also going to come in to help us, but we're not in the business of running security and policing, because we don't need to. Because if we do it right with trained staff, we don't need to. And then we also have addictions and mental health that's committed to bringing at least 4 therapists of different kinds in to be able to get ahead of the individuals. We've also partnered back with some of the bands in terms of some of the things that we can be doing to support individuals and properly respond to this. I have been sitting on the Alberta Rural Development Network for many years, and I sit on their rural homelessness committee. And one of the things that came up the other day that I know has been a factor for Wetaskiwin is transportation. And there's a huge amount of federal funding that's coming in the way of doing something different for transportation. I immediately put Wetaskiwin on the table and put them in touch with Paul, because that is important. We need that. So what my job is to sort of act as the puppeteer in terms of bringing everybody together and properly aligning strategic services so we're doing this the right way for once and for all. So that's the hub. One piece of the hub is an emergency housing program. That's the right wording. Is an emergency housing program. We are going to need long-term sustainable housing in Wetaskiwin to follow up with that emergency housing. That's on our to-do list, but we don't need it right now. So there's a long-term strategic vision in terms of what the Open Door knows we need to do and how we're going to operate it. And we're looking at actually grabbing people and wrapping services around them. So we're not just trying to piecemeal things together and have them fall through the cracks again.
If you came to us as a clinic, then we'd have no problem. It'd be able to fit into all of our bylaws, correct, Sue?
Through the chair to Councillor Hillgartner. I think that goes back to why Councillor Nielsen at the previous first reading wanted us to be clear that the motion from council was that we needed to be clear what it was used for and not try to hide it under a different zoning. So it wouldn't meet the definition of a clinic. It mostly aligns with the temporary shelter, which is what Andrew was trying to say. We don't have a zoning or a definition that meets the true intent of an integrated hub. We tried to get it as close as we could, and that was the closest we could.
But there is different phases that it's going to phase in. I know the first phase is a temporary shelter or whatever, but there's other phases which sort of fit along the clinic side of it. Is that correct?
I still don't think that it would meet the clinic definition.
Councillor Bronco.
Thank you, Tyler. Jessica, I'm kind of confused. Are we, and I think we presented this as a homeless center. I think it could have been a mistake, but you're saying how it's for other addictions and everything. Are you, wherever you're set up in Wetaskiwin, going to be taking homeless people or no, or just the ones with addiction? And is there an age category in these things? Or anybody can come in? Can a senior who doesn't have a home come in and have a shelter or a bed to warm up? Or does he have to, even though he has no addiction, he's homeless?
So I originally presented this as an integrated response hub that had a shelter component or an emergency housing component. There is no age group on it, a age limit on it, and you do not have to experience a mental health or an addiction issue to utilize the service.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. Just, I really appreciate your passion and knowledge on the issue. It seems like I say, you have great knowledge of what I think we need. And obviously, there's also concerns with that. When you went into negotiations with that area, did you end up talking to any of the neighbors in that area to alleviate the concerns of your passion? I'm not repeating that.
Other side. Other side. Nope. Down the stairs and up through that door. Thanks.
We are very aware from 3 years of watching what has happened in Wetaskiwin and being prolifically a part of it, what was going on. We are also a private business looking at purchasing a property privately. So in terms of people wanting community consultation, there needs to be a clear delineated line that we are not a provincially funded shelter coming in that would require that. We are a private business purchasing private property. And so that has been where we didn't need to have that conversation. We were looking at a building and we were interested in the purchase of it, and we're into that exploration of it. But we are a private business and we were interested in a private real estate deal. And that does not mean that we have to go community collaboration. We knew 100% that no matter where it goes in Wetaskiwin, there's going to be people that were unhappy. That is, we've known that from the get-go.
Okay, and I can appreciate all of that. But when there isn't that consultation with those people, they're not going to be very happy and they're going to influence our decision and dead. Right? I mean, to be honest with you, I came here was in full support. But I got my mind changed. And I'm just wondering, good neighbors, and I understand in business you don't want to tip your hand either on real estate deals or situations such as that. But this is a little bit different when it's something as much as a hub.
the zoning issue is on a building that we don't own. So I have to be very careful with speaking to that, right? But the other piece of that is that we have done this a few times before. We understand that getting in and starting something and proving it is more impactful than trying to get ahead, because people don't know what they don't know. And so then they react. And I don't know how much more information I can release, how many more statements I can release, how much more we can release. The haters will hate. That is what ultimately it comes down to. So we released as much as we possibly could. We did 2 community engagement sessions. We talked to stakeholders all over the place. We were presenting, we were all of these things. I don't know how much more we could have done. And then the decision was made to change the zoning, and it sort of took it completely out of our hands. So at that point, I was left to deal with people who were angry, and they weren't about to listen to me at that point.
I understand. Thank you.
Anything else? Councilor Blatz-Morgan.
Obviously, I'm not super thrilled about how everything transpired tonight. I'm really grateful that you guys are looking at our community and trying to do the best you can to try and help us. Because I believe that this hub that you have in mind is something that's going to be a vital game changer for our community and can solve a lot of the issues that we have in our community. And it's true, no matter where you put it, somebody's going to have an issue with it. And like I said, I feel that people will see the results of this and will be happy in the end. But in the beginning, it's always going to be difficult. And I want to know, I'm not sure if I can direct this to you, Sue, or not, but I want to know what we can do differently to try and get the ball rolling on this still.
Sorry, I didn't catch the last part. To get who going?
Get the ball rolling.
Oh. Through the chair to Councillor Blatz-Morgan, I believe, we've got the motion that's on the table to come look for a temporary site. In the meantime, administration is going to be looking at whether or not there is actually a site in the city that qualifies based on our land use bylaw. If we can't find that, the next step is council either makes the decision or we go through a land use bylaw amendment and put in new definitions and meetings, but those are months long. Land use bylaws require a ton of public consultation and notifications beyond what rezoning and development permits do. So yeah, we've got a couple of options that we'll bring back either at the special council meeting or at the next council meeting on what council's options are.
Councilor Nielsen.
Sue, again, this probably speaks to wherever we look next, wherever you look next. The threat of legal had to do with a question about whether the city was following due process and following its own bylaws. And that's worrisome in the context of making sure that we cross all the I's and dot all the T's going forward. So regardless of wherever we're looking in the future, that same process isn't hung up on the same pretense that the community didn't, or the city didn't follow its own processes. I don't even know that it needs a response. It's just an observation, Sue.
I would like to respond if I could, through the chair to Councillor Nielsen. So the only legal recourse that any of the people speaking tonight would have been the church, because they were the only ones that weren't legally notified within the 5 days. There is no opportunity for communities to speak against taxation bylaws, Part 17, which is planning and development bylaws. And the reason that the Municipal Government Act puts that in place is because they know this exact thing happens. So they give council the ability to make those decisions without fear of being brought to court. So if in the future we come forward with with a location that we deem to be best, and it still doesn't meet the land use bylaw requirements, council gets to make that decision without fear of being taken to court. The only piece we missed or could have been perceived to have missed is the legal notification requirements. So we're going to, until the land use bylaw gets rewritten and up to date, we are going to continually run into these types of issues because it's so outdated.
So could I come full circle? Sorry, Nat. Can I come full circle then? If the legal pretense that was flaunted tonight was a matter of following process, I don't know who I'm asking this question of, and you meet that process, then that legal position goes away, does it not?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, we needed to be certain. Andrew's recommendation was that we were at risk because of the one property that was not notified properly. If we were to go forward and do proper notification that checked every box from the MGA, then it would take away any legal recourse. So the fact that our own land use bylaw has a restriction in it, it is completely within council's purview to override that. And further to what Andrew was trying to explain tonight, and I'm not sure that it was completely clear with all of council, these are two different processes. So when the lawyers are speaking about our land use bylaw and the zoning of DC and what's allowed and what's not allowed, that has nothing to do with the rezoning. So the rezoning is under the Planning Act, and it has to do with council's ability to zone the property how they want. Once it is zoned, then the land use bylaw comes into effect to say, in this zone, here's the things. But again, council has complete purview to override some of those decisions in there.
Councillor Blatz-Morgan.
So on that same wavelength then, if we found a different location, council could override the land use bylaw instead of going through changing the land use bylaw?
Through the chair to Councillor Blatz-Morgan, yes, that's what we tried to do tonight. So we would be in the same position. I guess the same argument would stand from our perspective. So administration has been sent back to look at this again. And when we're looking at this, we are going to take all of the arguments of tonight and why this didn't pass, and we're going to compare that to these locations that we may or may not be able to come up with. Yeah. I think the same argument still stands, right? So unless we're given direction to ignore those, then we might go back to the same location and say, let's start this over.
Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 7B, Fire Service Bylaw 1872. Welcome, Chief.
Good.
Say that again. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight, we're here to present the amendment to our current fire services bylaw. This amendment will allow the fire services to start recovering costs associated to insurable losses. Insurable losses such as structural fires within the community. We currently do have the ability to recover costs on motor vehicle collisions and fires, but those seem to be very small scale incidents that don't require a lot of the fire department's time. So what we're looking at is moving up our cost recovery to be able to recover our costs back on larger scale incidents. So we brought this to council a couple months back at the committee of the whole, and we brought it back again for approval of our bylaw with some amendments that had to be that were identified and were fixed. Before we get to that point, though, there is one area I do have to address within the bylaw itself, and that would be under Schedule E. So the original Schedule E is somewhere in cyberspace. It left my bylaw, and somehow Schedule F became Schedule E. So I do have to address that in the bylaw and repair that in section 9.1 subsection A to reflect back to fees and fees recovered back under Schedule F. I did include a copy. It's a red ink copy of proposed changes to the current fire service bylaw. So with this, we are not the first department in the province of Alberta to move to this structure. So other departments are moving to this just because of the cost that it is bearing back on its taxpayers. So what we're looking at doing is making the responsible parties of the incident responsible for the cost of the incident. So we have seen in the last recent history 2 large fires that cost the taxpayers a very large sum of money. This is what we're trying to alleviate. So having this this type of incident back onto the insurance company of the responsible party will take the onus away from every other taxpayer within the city. So I know there was concerns on the last presentation in regards to persons in the community without home insurance or that are not insured. But we, as the administration, we can have a couple options to do this. So vacant properties can be charged back against the land taxes, or as members of council, you do reserve the right to bring in or hear the resident's plea or justification and then make decision to whether or not the fire department bills or not. So we do have a couple options. We don't want to be a business, is not our intent of this. We do, however, want to be able to recoup some of the cost that does get associated with very large incidents. So in the current red ink document, so it'll be listed under our schedule, I believe it's E on this one, which I do have to repair to put back to Schedule F. In the red, we do have items that were moved up, something that were very outdated. So failing to report a fire within the city, we changed from $100 to $500. So we want to put more of this onus back on the residents. If there's a way that we can promote fire safety, well, this is one way we can do it. Failure to report a dangerous goods incident or spill, even $500 is going to be a very low amount, but we do need a starting point. So currently it is at $250, but even to mitigate a dangerous goods incident is, upwards of the thousands of dollars just for the reclamation work that has to be followed upwards. Open fire without a permit, we moved to $150. Discharge fireworks without a permit, we moved this one to $250, and just because we do not allow the discharge of fireworks within the city unless it's a high hazard fireworks display, which comes with a different permitting process, and the technicians that are shooting the fireworks off are certified. So it won't be just myself or someone else I know going to the gas station, purchasing fireworks, going into an alley and shooting them off. So that is one of our areas in the bylaw that we don't allow. So we want to increase that levy just to let people know that we are going to recover cost if the fire department is called out. Failed to be in attendance of a fire pit. Failure to properly extinguish a fire. So these are very common throughout the spring and summer months for us. 3 a.m. 911 calls for fire pits does actually happen. Provide false or incomplete misleading information. So that one, it's either we move it to $500, and there's also the opportunity that there could be a criminal code infraction charge that for obstruction through the RCMP or our law enforcement. Interfere with persons authorized. So that would be, we did add into that one a maximum to $10,000. And the maximum is out of the Safety Codes Act, to which we follow not only through our quality management plan, but as safety codes officers for the city. Damage or destroy fire property. That one we changed to $500 plus the replacement cost. And the reason for that is we really don't have too much that lays on the ground that's less than $500. So our equipment is expensive. So having that replaced, if someone drives over our hose while we're at a fire scene, drives over our equipment on the ground that's there, that is very costly equipment to replace, specialized equipment. And then down in the lower section under the fees here, we changed the city-sponsored fireworks show from $50 to $200 for fireworks, and then addresses that are not visible from 100 to 150. On the next page under 9.1, under the fees, we are following the Alberta Transportation or Ministry of Transportation costs that they give us to respond to collisions. So the levy amount that we get per year now, so it does go up, is this year is $630 an hour for an engine or a rescue unit. And it's $830 an hour for a ladder truck. So very expensive pieces of equipment. And this we can use discretion on as well. I mean, as the fire service, the chief officers or duty officers. If we do attend a single family residential structure that is on fire, we can use our discretion to not create more undue hardship. So whether it's just the cost of one truck to pay for the firefighters' wages is really what we want to try and accomplish, because that does take a good chunk out of our budget. And then of course, motor vehicle collisions, those ones are set by the province, and insurable losses there. So those go straight to the registered owners insurance companies. Then we get down to 9.1, and then I'm not sure how it looks on yours, but my spacing all collapsed on me. But residential home alarms, we do want to keep the first one as a no charge. You know, use that as an educational moment. And then after that, move into the charges after that for the 3 month to 6 month, and then there on afterwards. Commercial, we are looking at, of course, the first alarm for commercial would stay at no charge, and then after that, we're at $300 to $500. And the reason being for that is when we start getting into commercial structures, we are sending more apparatus. We're sending more personnel. So large structures does require our ladder truck to roll. And then system not maintained for this, because it is a life safety issue. We did up the fine amounts to that to have these businesses, so apartments, other clients like grocery stores, retail stores, people that have alarm systems within their buildings, to have them maintained, because they are a very important component of life safety. And then down on the bottom, you'll see the life safety, or the not maintained fine amounts, and they pretty much just mirror the system not maintained in accordance to the National Fire Code. Fire investigations that are completed by an outside agency. We only added a $25 administration fee to that solely because they will bill the insurance companies on their own. And then fire investigations, we moved from $75 to $185. And this does include the time for the fire investigator, the vehicle, the tools, the writing of our reports. So it does take some time to do this. And we did include also in this a $300 charge if somebody does phone us looking for our fire reports, because there is time involved with this. The average fire report takes between 3 to 4 hours to generate. So at a current wage of a fire chief or deputy fire chief, that will exceed the $300 anyway. Occupancy load certificates for our businesses that require those. So any assembly type occupancy with an occupancy over 65 people will require one to be posted. We move these to $100 just because a safety codes officer has to go measure doors and make sure that that amount of people will be able to fit into that building. And then under 10.1, we just followed what was set out through our development permitting. And that would be 10% of the building permit surcharges where they can get the first fire inspection basically recuperated back for us. So in a nutshell, that is the amendments that we have just made to our current fire service bylaw. And right now I'd ask if there's any questions, please.
Entertain a motion and then we'll take questions. Councillor Bronco.
Motion, I move that we accept
First reading.
first reading of the bylaw 1975-5.
Moved by Councillor Bronco. Any discussion? Councillor Bronco.
Just clarification, maybe it's a dumb, but you keep saying failed to report a fire. Is that the person that the resident or the equipment or the accident fails to report, not somebody driving by and fails to report it, he ain't gonna get fined, right?
It would be the person having the incident.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Nielsen. No, Councillor Billingsley. Sorry, I just saw a hand out of the corner of my eye.
So when would this go into effect? The changes?
As I believe as soon as it's approved, we could put this in effect. Is that correct? I do have to fix Schedule F. I have to put that back in.
Okay.
And just fix the change there.
And then have you done the calculation as to how much more revenue will be brought in every year from these changes?
So I haven't calculated that yet, but I can put something together what we have completed over the last 11 months, 10 months. And I can bring that in and have that as for information if you wish.
Just at budget time, yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Bronco.
I think I was before.
Okay. Councillor Bronco.
Thank you. If we have an incident, let's say somebody started a backfire, a car in somebody's backyard, it was vandalism, would we still be charging or fire somebody who sets it off other than the owner who is unaware? And then it's an issue.
Unfortunately, yes. And the reason for that is because it is an insurable loss. So they will be going to their insurance company. If that vehicle has insurance on it, they will be going to their insurance company anyway to try and get that replaced. So even if it is vandalism, they do have insurance for vandalism, fire, and theft. So that's already on your policy, whether or not you did it or somebody else did it for you.
But if you have an incident where a corporation or a business or a residential, let's say, has a $2,500 deductible and the damage is $1,500, why would you want to go through insurance and not pay, but you're still going to charge them?
Well, I guess from past experience, if the vehicle does have a fire, it will far exceed that $1,500 or the $2,500 to begin with, because it's usually burnt to the ground. So it is a very rapid fire. And that will, again, be up to the discretion of the owner of that property, whether or not they want to pursue insurance or they don't. But then again, we can also have discretion on our end to how much we can bill out as well, whether it's just one truck for 1 hour, which is only the $630. You're welcome.
Councillor Hilgardner.
Thank you. Would it be possible, beginning of the year, I think all the business licenses have to be renewed anyway, that we send out information package on the false alarms, anything to do with the increases in businesses, because I think it's good information for them, because I think a lot of businesses then will pay attention and say, gee, I better, look at my system, make sure it's upgraded, the protocols and all that, because, it's costly for some of the businesses if they get caught twice with false alarms and so forth. And I don't think they realize it. So would it be possible to send something out with it?
You can put that communication out.
I think with the business license, it probably are, that's just one idea. It can go out however you want it, but just take a look at it.
Sure.
Get it out.
I think we have already completed something with it through this with our businesses already. Just letting them know that we have an increase in alarms. But lately, what we have found is the increase of alarms hasn't typically been most of our commercial clients. It's now more residential.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, with everybody wanting these security systems, the fire alarm's an add-on. So.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Through the chair to Jamie. You had mentioned that we're not the first community to do this. In your opinion, how common is it for?
So I reached out to a couple communities. This has been in discussion for a few years now to start going this model, but somebody had to take the first steps. So we do have, I did reach out to a Southern Alberta town, so town of Tabor. They already have implemented this with great success. And then the city of Leduc has a recovery model as well. So I do believe, I strongly believe that if people realize that they are going to be billed for fire services when they have a fire,
right,
they may take more proactive steps too into fire prevention.
Sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried.
I move that City Council give its second reading to bylaw 1975-1.
Third, you already gave.
Yeah.
We did second. Just skip third.
Oh, third. Oh, sorry. I move that City Council give the third reading to bylaw 1975-1.
Moved by Councillor Bronco. Anything further? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Item 8A, analysis of broadcasting service at the Civic Center Twin Arenas. Who gets to speak to that? Natasha.
All right, good evening, everyone. Mayor Gandon, members of council. Some of you might not know me. I'm Natasha Grant, the recreation coordinator for the city. I'm here today to present an analysis of the broadcasting service at the Civic Center Twin Arenas. A broadcasting service at the arenas would allow users to watch amateur sports virtually. Outlined in the RFD are two vendors who could provide the service. Those are Live Barn and TELUS. Live Barn, who presented to council on June 8th of this year, would install cameras in each arena and pay for the required hardware, installation costs, and internet connection. Broadcast would be made available via desktop and mobile browsers, as well as the LiveBarn app. Users would need to pay a monthly subscription fee for the service, in which 30% of the revenue generated from these memberships would be paid back to the city. The venue owner, the city, would be supplied with a login that would allow control of the schedule and when the cameras are turned on or off. The second option, recently TELUS has reached out to the city and is seeking a community partnership. They would offer a very similar service to that of LiveBarn and would cover the cost of installing the cameras in both arenas. Users who would like to subscribe to the service need to be a TELUS Optic customers, which currently in the city of Wetaskiwin, 53% of households are. There would be no revenue generated for the city under the TELUS agreement. For both options, the city would be responsible for the cost of electricity to run the service, as well as some administrative time for scheduling purposes. After considering the two alternatives, administration is recommending pursuing an agreement with LiveBarn for the provision of a broadcasting service at the arenas. So that's kind of the quick Coles notes. I thank you for your time. I'd now ask if there's any questions.
I'll entertain a motion, and then we can have all kinds of questions.
I move that administration pursues the agreement with LiveBarn for the provision of the broadcast services at the arenas.
Moved by Councillor Hilgartner. Any discussion? In the report, it said that 72% of Wetaskiwin residents had TELUS as their provider, but then you said 53.
Right, yeah, so we did reach out to TELUS, and the 72%, that's the penetration that TELUS has reached, so 72% could have TELUS Optic.
Gotcha.
Currently, yeah, just the
Oh, who would need to.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
exactly.
Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Item 8B, grass maintenance update.
Good evening. In 2020, administration implemented a pilot project to contract out grass maintenance services. At the time, it seemed logical to do this as a contracted cost versus the cost of current level of service provided by city staff. This year proved to be valuable for staff for watching the contractor. It showed that there is room for operational improvements. The contractors have shown that with a smaller crew, they could maintain the contracted areas. But where we did see a drop in the level of service included pruning, weeding, general cleanup of shrub beds, gopher trapping, and graffiti, to name a few. And these were the tasks that the summer student typically completed. The contract was awarded to Seasonal Impact for approximately $240,000. Seasonal Impact started on May 23rd, 2020, and they finished on September 30th with a final bill of approximately $220,000. Had the contractor extend the cutting season, it is likely that they would have gone over budget by $15,000. While this is slightly lower than existing budget, it was noted that several other services were much more challenging for existing staff to complete. Administration believes that with a change in level of service, we can reduce the area maintained by approximately 15 hectares and reduce equipment costs through disposal of 3 mowers, which would save the equipment pool approximately $2,000 for each mower. A communication program would also be implemented to notify the public on our level of service change. In addition to changes to the operational processes that are developed to find efficiencies within the office, such as driving lawnmowers to locations rather than transporting them, and then forming crews to maintain the zone rather than sending 5 people to the same location at the same time. Once the plans are finalized, a report on efficiencies can be completed and communicated back to council. This could help ensure that all landscape sites are being maintained to the desired level of service. The administration is recommending one of 2 motions. I move that City Council directs administration to reduce the grass cutting area by approximately 15 hectares, as shown in the diagram attached, or I move City Council to direct administration to review operational changes required to ensure that approved levels of service are being met. guess I'm open for questions.
Councillor Nielsen.
I move the city council directs administration to review operational changes required to ensure the approved levels of service are being met.
Moved by Councillor Nielsen. Go ahead.
So I made that particular motion because I don't understand how, if what we found out by doing contracted cutting, we found operational improvements where fewer people can cut the same amount of grass, why we would need to decrease the level of service by removing a whole bunch of areas where we currently cut grass. Those two don't seem to fit for me. We can get really better at cutting grass and meeting the current standard, but we're going to recommend taking more grass out of our available grass cutting. Like
This year, the contractor had a reduced area. They were cutting approximately 85 hectares of grass. In years previous, we were cutting well over 100. So with the reduction of service, there's less area to be maintained. If I understand your question correctly.
But if we can cut more grass with less people, because that's what seasonal impact could do, hypothetically, if we have the same number of people we always had, we wouldn't have any trouble getting those other 15 hectares cut because we're going to be more efficient in cutting.
The way I understand it is that seasonal impact, they had it in, like say, an 8-hour day or a 10-hour day to go maintain the same amount of grass, correct? We have an 8-hour day, and that included our maintenance and everything else with it. I'm understanding your question is that seasonal, they had a longer day to complete the same amount of area, I guess is the best way I could put it.
But then they weren't more efficient. They just had a longer day.
But they also, that's all they did was just cut grass. They didn't do no pruning. They didn't do anything else. Whereas our summer staff would maybe cut for 4 hours in a day and then they would go weed whacking at the end of the day. Whereas seasonal, they had one person on a mower, they go do that. Then they had a crew weed whackers would come along afterwards.
Are you thinking or done?
Oh, sorry, I'm thinking and done.
Councilor Bronco.
Thank you. Byron, you said something here, they had something about mobilization, that they bring a trailer, bring all their tractors to one place or their mowers. We don't do that. We drive all of our.
No, the contractors, they just drive their mowers to the site and then they do the job there. We had our equipment loaded on, we had a crew that would go around with 2 mowers and weed whackers, and they would drive around the site to site to site. We found when I implemented that 18 years ago, that was the best way to do that process. Now with the efficiencies of mowers, they've got a lot quicker and there's no longer need to load everything up on a trailer and go from site to site. We can just drive.
So a couple questions. One, to really get an accurate picture, we would have to re-tender this and see what the next, because we don't know what the next, if we keep this system live, we don't know what the tender is going to be for 2021. No. You know. Okay. The other question is impact staff compared to our staff, are they paid less or more?
I don't have that answer. That's entirely for seasonal impact, I would think.
Because that has the effect on the cost of the grass cutting. Do they cut it for $1,000 a hectare or whatever? And how so I'd like to compare apples. I don't know if you can ask that or not, but obviously it's next year, whatever the tender comes out or not. That's when you're going to see maybe they screwed up and they might raise it next year.
When I had the costs at the beginning of the year and they'd be different from what they are now. They were about $20 a hectare cheaper than what we were at that time.
But we had an issue this year with staff because of COVID and everything, so we don't know. Now, you're suggesting that we get rid of some assets for this year coming up, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What if if the tender comes in 40, 50,000 higher than what we could do? We don't have that equipment.
With these operational changes, we can get by with it. We're not shortchanging ourselves by any means.
Okay.
And that's, yeah, no, the three pieces of equipment, they were used, but are they absolutely necessary for operations?
But we have to know we need staff. So if we have more pieces of equipment, we can cut those hectares. It won't cost us as labor costs. Correct. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Nielsen.
So do we have some comparators? I guess what I'm looking at is when we did the whole enchilada ourselves, we had so many total hectares that we were responsible for.
Correct.
So what was the cost of us doing it? How many people did we have? What percentages were doing simply cutting versus how many were percentage-wise doing weeding and pruning? And then compare that to 2020 when we had a portion of the cutting, they had a portion of the cutting, but people weren't doing weeding and pruning. How do we make a comparison to make a decision about taking it all back in-house, one choice, taking it all back in-house and cutting a number of hectares out of the cutting cycle, or going back to contract cutting? Like, how do we make that comparison to know that we are getting the best level of service for the available dollars that we have?
Okay, I'll try and answer this best way I can. In years past, we had a grand total of 16 summer students. We had approximately 9 that would do mowing for the most part. So that was like 2 in each cemetery. We had 2 in a mowing crew, and then we had 3 that would go out on machines themselves. Okay, and the next part of your question was?
But we also had permanent staff, not just summer staff too.
Yes, we do.
And so what was the total cost in 2019? And I don't know that you'll have the answers right now off the top of your head, but what was the total hectares we cut in 2019? How much did it cost us? So that would be the permanent staff plus all the summer staff, and that included cutting and weeding. And then compare it to 2020, how much of the total hectares were done by the city versus how much was done by seasonal impact? How much was the cost for each of the city portion and seasonal portion? That would tell me, give me some kind of comparison from 2019 to 2020. And that would help me understand what recommendation is coming forward about taking it internally or farming it out.
You want me to answer that right now?
No, if you don't have that information, because at no point that I'm aware of has council asked to reduce lawn cutting in the city. I know there's been some requests to address weeding and pruning and deadheading and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of, hey, let's cut X number of hectares out of our cutting schedule, I don't know that there's ever been a direction from council for that. And I'm hearing that now. And I don't understand how I can make a decision to support it or not support it without an understanding of the whole picture.
Sue?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, the first part of that, there's 2 separate things going on with this RFD. So the first part of that we will certainly take as a formal information request. I've got it written down. I believe it's the same questions that were in the email, and then we'll make sure that that's addressed at the next council meeting or sooner. And then the other piece was the reduction in grass cutting. So when administration presented levels of service, one of the directions that we got from council and was reiterated at the strategic planning was in those areas where we found savings, we needed to bring those forward. So this is an area where regardless of the grass cutting contract. Byron's been talking for a couple of years about reducing the areas that we mow to try and create more natural environmental areas, which are going to then cut down on the amount of grass we need to cut and the costs to cut grass, et cetera, et cetera. So they're really two separate pieces.
Okay, and I appreciate that. But then to suggest that removing all these areas of cutting is going to save us $6,000 because we cut 3 machines out at $2,000 a machine is inaccurate, because we will have saved all sorts of gas, all sorts of manpower, all sorts of weed whacking, all sorts of other factors which would indicate a much more significant cost savings than just selling 3 machines.
Not necessarily. So I can't remember if we discussed this in a council meeting or not, but one of the things that we're looking at right now is what's our current expectation for the money that we get. And so we're going to sit down with Byron's crew and go over what they're doing, what they need to be doing, what they can realistically do with the staff that they have. So we could get rid of the equipment, and the equipment pool costs do include gas and maintenance and all that sort of stuff. But those staff would be repurposed to make sure we can meet council's level of service that they're paying us for. So a lot of the pictures that were presented where weeds and trees were growing in front, we would present those to council. We're hoping to get that done before budget and come in and say, with the existing staff, we can get this done. So it's really repurposing those staff from grass cutting over to these other areas like weed eating and maintenance of those flower beds, et cetera.
So I think that's the level of service review that council's been looking for as long as I've been around.
Yeah.
So then I support Councillor Nielsen's motion that we get a review of the operational changes, but that would also include the level of service. And if we cut out this number of hectares from our survey or from our cutting, what does that look like? Does it free up staff? Are we going to be going back with summer students? What does that cost us in comparison to contracting it out? Are we saving $100,000 this year from contracting out the grass cutting like we had hoped for when we were trying this new initiative, or are we not? What's our game plan going forward? So getting a report back to council to figure out what we need to do next year. That way we're better informed and have the numbers behind it. Councillor Billingsley.
Well, Councillor Nielsen asked most of the questions that I was going to ask. And for us to make an informed decision, we need a lot more information. The whole idea of contracting this out was a pilot project to see if it was cost effective to not use city employees, whether they're summer students, and contract it out. But I got nothing here that tells me one way or the other that it was a smart decision or a bad decision. And I think without data, it's going to be really hard for us to make an informed decision if this was the right move. So like I say, getting that data will certainly help. The only other one that I did want to ask about that is that, did we have any summer students this year?
We had 5 total. We had 3 in the transportation department and 2 that supplemented the parks department.
So instead of, you said 15 last year?
16 last year.
Yeah, so, okay. Because I mean, that's got to factor in too, because those are dollars that, I mean, we need the whole picture to see if this makes sense, one way or the other.
We don't make bad decisions. We make decisions that we're going to learn from.
Is that right?
Anything else? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Item 8C, inclusivity campaign.
Oh, I gotta take this mask off. Okay, you can thank Candace for the fact that there's a PowerPoint presentation associated with this and not a really lengthy engineering report, because that's the road I was going down when she sent me a PowerPoint, and I thought, oh, this is probably really what they want to see. So all of administration, most of administration has got together and started to develop different areas of the motion that came forward out of a previous council meeting on July 20th. So the attached PowerPoint presentation is going to outline some of the strategies that are meant to identify the city's current state with respect to internal policies and processes and where we rank as a community when it comes to inclusivity and diversity. There are funds available through AUMA. In the report, I don't know that I made it clear. The deadline for the application has been closed, but AUMA, we've talked to them and they said that we should still submit. So we're hoping to tap into that $50,000 to have someone come in and help us with this initiative as well. So it should be noted that Wetaskiwin is a member of the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, and we have been since 2010. So there were 10 commitments that we made to become a part of this coalition. I won't read them all out, but they're identified in the agenda report on page 124. And so when I went through and looked at each one of these, I tried to make sure that somehow the motions that, or the three motions that we're putting forward will somehow link into each one of these. And so we're asking that administration approve three different motions, or sorry, council approves three different motions today. One is the Welcome In Wetaskiwin Inclusivity Marketing Plan, which I'll talk about later, developing human resources strategy to address our internal inclusion and diversity. And then initiate a task force as part of the main motion, and then a separate motion that council would support our application for the grant through AUMA. The alternative motions that we have here is that council could amend the motion or could receive the report as information. So, okay. Sorry, Karen, can you just go back to the first one? Thanks. Okay. So I think we can all agree that we need to find solutions to make sure that our community is a diverse and inclusive community. There's global movement going on right now and has been really for the majority of 2020. And we owe this basic human right to our citizens. And so we're basically saying that it's no longer an option for us as a community. We need to do something. Next slide. So in 2031, 1 in 5 Albertans will be a senior. So I'm going to start to walk through some of the history within our community and the people that are affected. So to help our citizens feel safe, active, and engaged, we need to make sure that we're increasing their volunteer opportunities within our community, and that we're also developing our infrastructure so that we're thinking of them from a mobility standpoint, as well as the fact that seniors are often discriminated against in a variety of different ways as well. So next slide, thank you. Retaining our youth in our community will be integral to a specific action. It has to be intentional. So we do not want our youth growing up here and leaving the community and not staying here. And a lot of them are. So we need to come up with ways to keep our youth in our community. They also need opportunities to volunteer, and they need to feel like they're being heard. So quite often in most communities, the youth are just brushed off as their opinions don't matter. They have a lot to teach us, and the new generation coming up insist on having a community that is theirs and that that is acting in an inclusive and diverse manner. So 1 in 20 Canadians identify as LGBTQ2+. That's a handful. Our community has a number of groups that are very supportive of these citizens and should be consulted on how to improve the city's image and what steps need to be taken towards inclusion. So this one and a couple of the next ones were really interesting to me when you think back with human rights and laws that have been changed. And so it's only been since 1996 that the Human Rights Act was amended to include this group of people. So it's really important that we think of them through our community as well. Another stat for our province, in Alberta, there is more than 12,000 individuals with developmental disabilities. And while the Act protects them with how services are being provided, there's very little that actually directs how municipalities treat people with developmental disabilities. So we're very lucky as an organization that we have embraced this, and we need to continue to do that. And part of the strategy that we would be looking at is seeing how our community can also employ persons with disabilities. So 23% of Wetaskiwin citizens identify as Indigenous. And given our close connection with Musqueam, developing a meaningful actions of inclusion with our Indigenous population is imperative. This is the same initiative for all of our marginalized communities. So we have a very large Filipino community, et cetera, and we need to start thinking of how they fit into our community. Another fact that I thought was very interesting when we were doing the research on this, it's only been since 2008 that Indigenous people were allowed to make a complaint under the Human Rights Act because they were not considered people that needed to be protected. So that's 12 years. It's not that long ago. We found that very interesting. So next slide. So what should we do? Ethically, we have an obligation to do what's right, and the motion that was brought forward is pushing us towards thinking about that in our community and what that looks like. So we need to reflect our community's diversity. We need our organization to look like our community. We need to create safer communities, and there's a lot of studies that show that the more we involve our community and the diverse population, the more safe the community becomes. It's going to increase efficiencies, especially within an organization like the city. We have to comply with the law, so there's a lot of legislation right now around OH&S and obviously the Human Rights Act and such that say that we must do this. There were a lot of links to economic development, so Candace's team has a few ideas on how we can link our economic development to the diverse and inclusive community. And of course, we need to meet Council's vision and mission. So we currently have 3 areas that we want to focus on, and I'll go into detail a little bit more. So the Welcome in Wetaskiwin marketing campaign has 2 options. There's a citizen task force that we're hoping would spend the next 13 months developing a bunch of strategies for the community and the organization. City administration is also looking at internal policies and procedures on an ongoing basis. So I'm not going to, next slide, Karen. I'm not going to read through all of the purposes, goals, and success indicators, but this is just the beginning. So we've looked at a number of different goals and what we can accomplish. And then we've also identified a number of success indicators. So as an example, we want to be able to reduce the number of incidents of hate crimes in our community by 10% each year. So these are some of the strategies that we're hoping that the task force can say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we want to achieve, and here's how we're going to get there. So these are just ideas of some of the other communities that have already been through this and what they've come up with, and things that will help, if approved, get our task force working on some of these strategies. Next slide. So the first part of the Welcome in Wetaskiwin, there's 2 options there. The 14,500 is using the existing tagline of Welcome in Wetaskiwin, and then the 17,000 would be developing a new tagline. So we have a business case that will be in front of council for budget that has identified both of these through budget. So we're not asking for decision tonight, just showing you the differences between those, and that you'll see that at budget. The next piece is a citizen task force. So we're looking at creating, and this can be changed. It's not, this was just a starting point. So we were thinking including at least 2 from council, including city staff, and up to 15 community members that would have about 13 months to achieve some really high level objectives. So broaden community engagement and municipal decision making for people that are underrepresented, improve equitable service delivery, develop ways to celebrate the full diversity of Wetaskiwin, and design a safe business campaign to be presented to council for funding. So some of the ideas around that we started brainstorming were stickers that businesses could put on that says, you know, we're a safe and inclusive employer and we're a safe space for people. So kind of like the block, the block parents. So easily identifiable that this is a business that that follows the safe and inclusive guidelines. And so also we would work with those businesses to come up with strategies to how they could be better employers and how their staff could treat our citizens who are diverse and underrepresented in our community and stop some of the racism and discrimination that's happening. So we would work with them on that. And then the last one was city administration. So right now, under our current budget, we have someone reviewing our policies and procedures. And what we're trying to do is identify areas where we need to change some of our policies and procedures to make sure that we're meeting the law and that we are not putting up barriers to people that are underrepresented for applying for jobs with the city. This also links into the AUMA grant. So if it was approved, we would bring someone on in 2021 to come in and start to implement some of that, to do training with our staff about inclusivity and diversity and creating programs within the city so that we as employees of the city can be more diverse and inclusive in our day-to-day activities. So that's also a business case that we have in front of council. Potential programs. So the last slide before questions. Some of the other things, these are just examples that other communities have come up with. So, you know, the task force could look at developing programs such as Roots of Empathy. So this is where they go into schools at a young age and start teaching children about empathy and making sure that they grow up to be adults who care about the community and don't discriminate or harass people. There's lots of opportunities to work with SAGA and other groups for coming out stories. It's a way of educating the community of the hardship that people have had because of their sexual orientation. Indigenous trauma sharing. So some communities have set up meetings and opportunities for the Indigenous peoples to come talk about the struggles that they have had so that we can start to understand and find more empathy for them. Mobility awareness through design. So administration was talking earlier, but we ran out of time of getting a bunch of wheelchairs from the landfill because surprisingly there's a lot of wheelchairs out there. And we were going to pair up a staff member with a council member and see if you could get through the city in certain areas in a wheelchair. So some of those kinds of campaigns to raise awareness we're looking at. Help to further promote Wetaskiwin Family Resource Center. I understand the Boys and Girls Club have a family resource program. So any of the existing community groups that have these programs in place, we want the task force to find ways on how we can help support those and make them more well known. Develop strategies for our businesses to be more inclusive. Obviously, I touched on that a little bit earlier. And then increase volunteer opportunities for everyone. That's something that the city can certainly take the lead on, and then it could be rolled out throughout the community. That's the presentation. Are there any questions?
Councillor Blatz-Morgan.
Do you want me to make a motion first?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Should I do the first one with all three in it in one go?
If you think all three will pass.
Heck yeah. Okay, I move that council directs administration to include the following campaigns in the 2021 budget deliberations. Welcome in Wetaskiwin Inclusivity Marketing Campaign to be funded through the 2021 budget approval. Develop a human resources strategy to address internal inclusion and diversity directives to be funded through the 2021 budget approval. And initiate a task force for a community and business diversity and inclusion plan.
Moved by Councillor Blatz-Morgan. Any discussion? Councillor Nielsen.
First off, I'm glad to see that the municipal employment force will include, it will mirror the community, so you'll be hiring way more seniors, and that'd be excellent.
Absolutely.
I guess my question actually is for Candace, I guess, because as we talk about the inclusivity campaign and welcome in Wetaskiwin, and we heard earlier from Chris Steele, branding and marketing, how do you guard against too many catchphrases and buzzwords competing with each other?
Yeah, so that's one of our concerns, and that's why it's interesting to welcome in the campaign that goes for residential, our business using that as a welcome immediate actions to use, and that was the suggestion that we had when we originally came up with the this is a temporary piece until we actually have an economic spring.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
This three-part, so what would happen if at budget, we decide not to fund the $17,000, but we still want to go ahead with the task force? So what happens there?
We pick and choose as we go along.
But the motion.
You can take, the motion is just having it part of
So
the budget deliberation.
Okay, so no matter what that, I don't want to lose the part C. And I'm not saying I don't want to spend money, but in case that happens, I don't want that other thing to be dropped off. Okay.
No, it still has to come to council as part of the budget deliberation.
Okay, fair enough.
You just don't want to spend money.
Anything else? Councilor Boxell.
Just want to say, like, you guys did a really, really good job on this. And I'm really excited to see all of that, especially the different groups that you guys are looking into. And Roots of Empathy actually sounds like a really, really great idea. So I'm really happy to see what you guys brought back.
Likewise. Yes. Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried.
I move that City Council directs administration to apply for the AUMA Measuring Municipal Inclusion Grant totaling $50,000.
Moved by Councillor Blatz Morgan. Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. Oh. Item 8D, Finance and Audit Committee Terms of Reference.
So earlier in 2020, the bylaw for council boards and committees was approved, and it left an opportunity for other council boards and committees to be created. There was some talk earlier about including a finance and audit committee, so administration has drafted up what we believe would be a good terms of reference to be added to that bylaw, and it's attached for council's discussion.
Councillor Billingsley?
Just want for clarification. It is part, like, obviously I read through this of what was recommended. Is it possible to do something along the lines of through P&T where it could technically be open to the public and or then all of us, some of us, and administration at that type of meeting? And if we did that, my assumption is then it has to be open to the public. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, there is a couple of different ways that we could look at the boards and committees. So it could be completely in private if council chooses to do that. But it would have to be stated in the terms of reference that it would be considered a closed meeting. And council could appoint members of council to sit on that committee with administration. The other option is a lot of finance and audit committees are all of council and they are open to the public, or they are, as we've suggested, where you do some of council, some of the public, some of administration, and it could be open or closed. I did do a little bit more research on that last night. So if it is going to be closed, it just has to be stated in the terms of reference that it is a closed meeting. However, it is our recommendation that anytime we're meeting as a council board or committee that we do open it to the public if they want to attend. And that could just mean the door is open at committee room.
I think I'll make a motion. I think I will. I move that City Council Creates a finance and audit committee. How do I want to do this? It was the second one that you spoke of, and I apologize, it's getting late. Basically having it open in with some or all of council and administration. I don't know how the hell to do it.
So
What did you call that, Sue? Sorry.
it would depend on how many members want to join. So it could be, I would say it should be a minimum of at least 2 council members and administration, and it could be opened or closed sessions.
I got nothing to hide. Open. Okay, it's right here.
It's a long night.
Can we put a minimum of 2?
Now, the only problem with this, of course, there's not a lot of term of references exactly what the heck we're doing.
Well, we could change the existing, like, are there other pieces of the terms of reference that you don't like? Because we could use the existing terms of reference.
Right.
And then just change the composition.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay, so the composition would be the same, or the duties and all that would be exactly the same, correct?
Yes. So, yeah.
Should we have something about being open? And then open, yeah, thank you. And I'm open for friendly.
Karen, can we add in removing sections D and E from composition? Would we be safe removing J if it's just staff council?
What was that last part, Sue?
Could we remove J since it's going to be just staff and council? I would imagine you're not going to try and remove us for bad behavior.
Yes.
I don't know, I might want that in there.
Meeting, yeah. A maximum?
Yeah.
Well, I think it would still fall under a committee because it's the F&A committee that's part of the committees and boards bylaw, right? Mm-hmm. So we would have to set a maximum then to make sure that it's not considered a council meeting.
Yes.
And
Sorry.
I think that has to be 4 or less.
Sorry, Rob, what are your concerns?
It was just around the wording that it could be a minimum of 2. And what I was saying to Sue was that if we have a majority of the council at a session, collecting information on the decisions can be considered a council meeting. And if it's going to be a council meeting, then it is literally the so I just suggesting that we maybe put a little bit more framework around whether that's a maximum of 50 to avoid the time.
So we could still say a maximum of 3. And still, from there, we wouldn't fall into considering a council meeting. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. And then I think we should add a motion to this.
Maximum of 3 councillors, then, I guess, instead of a minimum of 2, a maximum of 3.
And I think we should add, because we'll need to update the committees and boards bylaw with who's sitting on this committee for councillors. Appoint the 3 councillors to the Finance and Audit Committee. Okay.
And when you say that it's public, that just means we would still meet in the committee room, that just the door would be open. If somebody wants to walk in, they're more than welcome to do so.
Yep.
Do you publish then when these meetings happen?
You would have to.
My mic's off. Yes, we would.
Okay. Pretty dry, but sure. Somebody wanted to come. No offense.
Having your intention.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, it does.
Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Any discussion? Councillor Nielsen.
So it includes up to a maximum of 3 councillors. So in the event amongst the 7 of us, there's only 1 or 2 people that want to sit on it. Help me understand the value then.
Well, I think that you're speaking to me.
Sure.
Okay. Like to me, if we get 2, what'll happen, or 3, or 1. From there, if there's any issues, concerns, findings, praises, that would then, this committee then would report back to council.
Is that right in your mind?
Well, this committee hasn't.
No administration. Where are the gaps in hoping to close?
I think that we get a very large overview of the financial well-being of the organization. This more gets into the day-to-day. I guess you'd call it getting into the weeds, right? It's things that you may find that you didn't know about the organization that we're doing, that then could be brought forward to the rest of council. Like I say, whether it's irregularities, thank you. And like I say, if there is any of that kind of issues, a year and a half ago when I was looking through signing checks every week. Saw it all the time.
And that's why I wonder if this is being what you're after. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the duties, you say staying in the weeds, and I'd say you're way back. A is annual municipal budget process, the organization budget. Long-term financial planning, municipal grants, borrowing bylaws, reserve levels, and animal law. And that's a long ways from looking at checks that are written. So I understand the value you saw.
Councilor Nielsen, you're not just speaking to Councilor Billingsley.
I understand the value that you've seen by being part of a more in the weed process. But as this written, I see this pulling you way, way back from in the weeds. Maybe that's just interpretation of what I view these duties being. And I wonder if you would see irregularities or issues that we wouldn't otherwise see.
Is it only to these 7 or 8 items then? And I guess that's what you're asking. And would the committee then have the ability to go further?
Through the chair to Councilor Billingsley, we can change the committee duties to whatever council wants to look at. It is my experience that although you're not going to be signing checks and reviewing the weekly batches,
Thank you.
you are, even with this information, you'll get a lot more, a better understanding of how we operate and what we're doing, and actually be able to influence some of the policies we bring forward to council. So it is, although it seems really high level and strategic, I have seen some detailed information shared in these committees, and the ability to guide administration to make reports that are more useful for council.
So if let's say it goes as presented or as brought forward in the motion, and it's 6 months from now and we've decided we need I, J, and K, does that mean then it would just have to bring it to council and add it to, and that would happen immediately, or does it have to wait till the following committee, or sorry, the organizational committee, or could it be done right away, changes to that committee?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, yes, we can come back and do changes, and because it would be changes to an existing bylaw, yeah, but it's part of a bylaw or policy? Right, so any change to a bylaw takes effect the minute it's approved. So if this is a schedule of that bylaw, when a bylaw gets approved, that's when the changes take effect that day.
So to me, I think that this would be a good start. Okay. And if it's easily amended, if something is needed, that could always be added or something taken away.
Was it covered when I stepped out for a minute about what you'd be voting on?
Sorry, what we would be?
In the meeting, Was it covered while I stepped out what you will be voting on in that meeting?
Well, we will look in the committee meeting into there.
In this meeting? And so in establishing this committee,
yeah,
what are you going to be voting on?
I don't know if we'll be voting on anything.
I would hate to see or have the impression that there's going to be the opportunity to make decisions.
Yeah, and it's more of a
information.
Yeah, well, personally, I didn't really think of it as being, I don't want to tell Robert how to do his job, and nor should I, or anybody else on this, on this council.
I don't want that misconception.
No, and I think that's maybe the reason why I didn't want other members at large on this, is that they may not be able to quite grasp the idea that Robert doesn't answer to us or to this committee.
But then that's up to the chairperson and a good understanding what the terms of reference are for that committee if you're going to set it up. I think the importance of having members at large is there, but I think that there has to be, again, a clear understanding of what the terms of reference are, so that there isn't people in the community thinking that they're going to be telling Robert when and how to cut checks. And
yes, and that's why I never really thought about really a voting. It's more so information.
Right. Okay, can we take 11 out then of the meeting section? Or no, I guess we'll be voting members. So.
Oh, sure. I wonder if we need to table this and
I was just going to suggest that we could take this back and work with Councillor Billingsley on what his intention was, and then bring it back to a subsequent meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Those in favor of tabling? Carried unanimously. I guess the proclamation should have been done at the beginning, but I was more interested in the public hearing. So item 8E, we have a proclamation of Remembrance Week of 2020. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Tyler Ganda, Mayor of the City of Wetaskiwin, do hereby proclaim the week of November 9th to 13th, 2020 as Remembrance Week in the City of Wetaskiwin, given under the hand and official seal this 26th day of October 2020 at Wetaskiwin, Alberta. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Nine A. Councillor Blackmorgan. Yes, we can. Those in favor? Carried. Look at all the people jumping up to get to the door. Man, you carry a big stick.
Get right at it. They just wanted to get up and walk.